This is Easy Drift Sleep, and tonight we have something special for you. We are going to guide you through Mary and Martha, two sisters and the one thing needful, uncovering its hidden corners and forgotten details. If these evenings bring you comfort, tap subscribe now. Your next story is always just one sleep away. Take a slow breath, release what you are holding, and let your story begin. The afternoon sun, a gentle wash of gold and apricot, began its slow descent over the Judean hills, casting long, soft shadows across the terrace slopes of Bethany. A warm, dry breeze, carrying the faint, earthy scent of sun-baked dust and distant olive groves, whispered through the narrow, winding paths that meandered between the small, flat-roofed homes. The air itself felt thick and still, humming with the distant drone of cicadas and the occasional, sleepy bleat of a goat from a nearby pen, a quiet symphony of an ordinary day drawing to its close. Inside one of these humble village dwellings, the air was already growing heavy with the promise of a meal, a subtle aroma of baking bread and simmering herbs beginning to mingle with the lingering scent of sun-warmed stone and dried wildflowers tucked into cracks in the walls. It was into this unassuming village, nestled just a short journey from the bustling, often overwhelming grandeur of Jerusalem, that a small group of travelers made their way. At the head of this group walked Jesus, his steps unhurried, his presence radiating a quiet calm that seemed to smooth the very air around him. He was accompanied by his disciples, men whose faces bore the marks of long days spent walking dusty roads, their simple tunics and sandals speaking of a life lived close to the earth, under the open sky. They were weary, no doubt, from their journey, their conversations having dwindled to a comfortable silence as the day waned and the prospect of rest drew near. Bethany itself was a place of relative peace, a welcome respite from the crowds and the constant demands that often pressed in on Jesus in larger towns. It was a village known to him, a place where he had friends, a sanctuary from the ceaseless movement of his ministry. Among these friends were two sisters, Martha and Mary, and their brother Lazarus, whose home was often a haven for him and his companions. And so, as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of lavender and rose, it was towards their familiar dwelling that their footsteps were purposefully directed. Martha, the elder sister, was a woman whose energy seemed to hum just beneath the surface, a practical and diligent spirit who found her purpose in the rhythm of daily tasks. Her hands were rarely still, always finding something to mend, to clean, to prepare. She was, in many ways, the anchor of her household, the one who ensured that everything ran smoothly, that guests were welcomed with warmth and abundance. The news of Jesus' approach, carried perhaps by a child running ahead or a neighbor's casual remark, would have stirred a flurry of activity within her. The thought of such an honored guest, along with his many followers, arriving at her doorstep would have immediately set her mind to the intricate dance of hospitality. For Martha, hospitality was not merely a social custom, it was a deeply ingrained cultural imperative, a sacred duty. In that ancient world, where inns were often rudimentary and travel could be perilous, opening one's home to a traveler was an act of profound generosity and protection. And for a teacher of Jesus' stature, a man whose reputation for wisdom and miraculous deeds had spread far and wide, the expectation would have been even greater. She would have envisioned the needs of so many mouths to feed, so many bodies to shelter, so many weary travelers to comfort. Her mind would have raced through the pantry, assessing supplies, calculating portions, planning the sequence of dishes. The house itself, like most in Bethany, would have been simple, built of local stone or mud brick, with a flat roof often used for drying herbs or for sleeping on warm nights. The main living area would have been a single, spacious room, perhaps with smaller alcoves or rooms leading off it. The floor would have been packed earth or stone, cool beneath bare feet. Light would have filtered in through small, unglazed windows, or through the open doorway, which now stood ready to receive its distinguished guests. As Jesus and his disciples finally reached the threshold, Martha would have been there to greet them, her face alight with a mixture of genuine welcome and a subtle undercurrent of bustling readiness. Her hands, perhaps already dusted with flour or damp from washing, would have gestured them inside, her voice, though warm, carrying a hint of the urgent tasks that lay ahead. "Welcome, Master," she might have murmured, her eyes quickly assessing the size of the group, her mind already adding up the number of loaves of bread and the amount of wine that would be needed. The disciples, with their travel-stained cloaks and dusty sandals, would have gratefully accepted her invitation, finding places to settle on woven mats or low cushions arranged around the main room. The air would have filled with the soft rustle of their movements, the quiet murmurs of greeting, and the gentle thud of their bags being set down. Martha, ever the efficient host, would have immediately begun to direct her household, perhaps calling to a younger servant or even to her sister, Mary, to fetch water for washing feet, a customary and much appreciated act of hospitality after a long journey. Mary, in contrast to her bustling sister, possessed a quieter, more contemplative spirit. She was not less devoted to her guests or less appreciative of their presence, but her devotion expressed itself in a different way. While Martha's love manifested in diligent service, Mary's found its outlet in attentive presence. She was drawn to the words, to the wisdom, to the very essence of the person before her. And so, as Jesus settled into a place of honor, perhaps on a low bench or a cushioned mat, and began to speak, Mary found herself irresistibly drawn to his side. She sat at his feet, a position typically reserved for a disciple learning from a rabbi. This was a significant gesture, for in that society, women were generally not permitted to sit and learn in the same manner as men. They had their own sphere, their own duties, which were considered equally vital but distinct. For Mary to take this position was an act of quiet defiance, or perhaps, more accurately, an act of profound spiritual hunger that transcended conventional expectations. Her gaze would have been fixed on Jesus, her posture one of complete absorption, her hands resting quietly in her lap, utterly still. The sounds of the household would have continued around her, to the clatter of pottery from the kitchen area, the soft murmuring of the disciples as they conversed quietly, the distant sounds of the village fading into the twilight. But for Mary, these sounds would have receded, becoming a distant hum, as her entire being focused on the gentle cadence of Jesus' voice, on the words that flowed from him like a cool, clear stream. She was not merely listening, she was absorbing, drinking in every syllable, every nuance, allowing his presence to fill her. Meanwhile, in the warmer, busier confines of the kitchen area, Martha's efforts intensified. The aroma of freshly baked bread would have begun to fill the air, mingling with the earthy scent of lentils simmering in a clay pot, perhaps spiced with cumin and coriander. She would have been kneading dough with practiced hands, the rhythmic push and pull a familiar comfort, her brow perhaps furrowed slightly in concentration. The fire in the small hearth would have crackled and hissed, casting flickering shadows on the rough-hewn walls. She might have been grinding grain with a stone mill, the steady, grinding sound a testament to her tireless work. The tasks were endless. Water needed to be drawn from the village well, a heavy clay jar balanced on her hip or shoulder. Vegetables needed to be washed and chopped to onions, garlic, perhaps some fresh greens from a small garden patch. Oil and wine needed to be poured into serving vessels. The flatbreads, once baked, would need to be kept warm. The house itself needed tidying, the mats arranged, the lamps lit as darkness began to truly settle. Each movement was purposeful, each action driven by her deep-seated desire to provide comfort and sustenance for her esteemed guests. As the minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity of bustling activity, a subtle tension would have begun to build within Martha. The sounds of Jesus' calm voice from the main room, punctuated by the quiet, attentive silence of Mary, would have drifted to her ears. Each time she glanced towards the doorway, she would have seen Mary still seated, motionless, seemingly oblivious to the mounting demands of the household. A small sigh might have escaped Martha's lips, a flicker of exasperation beginning to spark within her otherwise hospitable heart. Her hands, though swift and efficient, would have felt the weight of every task, the growing pressure of time. The sweat might have beaded on her brow from the heat of the hearth, and a stray strand of hair might have fallen across her face, impatiently pushed back with the back of her hand. The thought would have begun to form, a small, insistent whisper in her mind, "Surely, Mary sees how much there is to do. Surely, she understands the expectations of hospitality." The cultural context of the time would have amplified Martha's feelings. The role of women in the household was clearly defined, and preparing a meal for guests, especially for a large group, was a monumental undertaking that typically involved all the women of the house. For one sister to sit idly while the other toiled alone would have been considered highly unusual, perhaps even disrespectful to the guest, as it implied a lack of collective effort in their welcome. Martha's concern was not simply about her own burden, but about upholding the honor of her home and her family. The scent of the cooking food, now richer and more complex, would have filled the entire house, a delicious promise of the meal to come. But for Martha, the aroma was now tinged with the subtle bitterness of growing resentment. She imagined the disciples, tired and hungry, waiting patiently for their supper. She imagined Jesus, perhaps noticing the delay or the single-handed effort. The thought of any perceived inadequacy in her hospitality would have been deeply distressing to her. Finally, the burden became too heavy to bear in silence. Her movements, though still efficient, would have taken on a slightly sharper edge. The clatter of a pot, the rustle of fabric, would have been just a fraction louder, a subtle signal of her mounting frustration. She would have wiped her hands on her apron, her gaze hardening slightly as she turned towards the main room, towards the figure of her sister, still lost in contemplation at Jesus' feet. Her voice, when it came, would not have been loud or shrill, but it would have carried an unmistakable tone of exasperation, a thinly veiled plea for justice and assistance. It was not a question, but an appeal, a direct address to Jesus himself, for she knew that he held sway over Mary's attention. She would have stepped into the doorway of the main room, perhaps her hands on her hips, or gesturing vaguely towards the kitchen, her eyes flicking between Jesus and Mary. "Lord," she would have begun, the word perhaps tinged with a touch of respectful complaint, "do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone?" The words would have hung in the air, a stark contrast to the earlier peaceful hum of the room. It was a direct challenge, not just to Mary, but to Jesus himself, questioning his awareness, his concern, his implicit approval of Mary's inaction. Her voice would have been steady, but the underlying emotion would have been clear, a sense of being overwhelmed, overlooked, and unfairly burdened. She was not just asking for help, she was asking for validation, for someone to acknowledge the immense effort she was expending, and to gently, or perhaps not so gently, redirect her sister to her proper duties. "Tell her then to help me." The command was unequivocal, a direct request for intervention, for Jesus to use his authority to restore what Martha perceived as the natural order of things. The silence that followed her outburst would have been profound, broken only by the crackle of the hearth fire and the distant sounds of the evening. All eyes would have turned to Jesus, waiting for his response. The disciples, who had been quietly observing the dynamic between the sisters, would have held their breath, perhaps anticipating a gentle chiding of Mary, an affirmation of Martha's diligent efforts. Mary, stirred from her deep concentration by the sudden sharpness in her sister's voice, would have slowly lifted her gaze from Jesus' face. Her eyes, perhaps still a little unfocused from her absorption, would have met Martha's, a flicker of surprise, then perhaps a touch of understanding, passing between them. She would have felt the weight of her sister's words, the unspoken accusation, the undeniable truth of Martha's solitary labor. Yet, she remained seated, her position at Jesus' feet a silent testament to her chosen priority. Jesus, however, did not respond with the immediate affirmation Martha might have expected. His gaze, gentle and understanding, would have settled upon Martha, not with judgment, but with a profound, almost tender insight into her heart. He would have seen not just the busy hands and the tired frame, but the anxious spirit, the worry that gnawed at her, the desire to please that had become a source of distress. His voice, when he finally spoke, would have been soft, calm, and infinitely compassionate, cutting through the tension in the room like a cool breeze. "Martha, Martha," he would have repeated her name, the double utterance a common Hebrew idiom used to express affection, concern, or sometimes, gentle admonition. It was a way of drawing her close, of acknowledging her fully before offering his perspective. The sound of her name, spoken with such tender repetition, would have been like a balm, perhaps momentarily disarming her, causing the sharp edges of her frustration to soften just a little. He would have paused, allowing the sound of his voice to settle, allowing her to truly hear him, not just with her ears, but with her heart. His eyes, full of a deep, knowing kindness, would have held hers, conveying a profound understanding of her struggles, her worries, her ceaseless efforts. He saw her, truly saw her, not just as a busy host, but as a person burdened by many cares. "You are anxious and troubled about many things," he would have continued, his voice still soft, yet carrying the weight of profound truth. He was not dismissing her work, nor was he criticizing her desire to serve. Instead, he was gently pinpointing the underlying emotional state that had driven her outburst, the internal disquiet that had transformed her commendable diligence into a source of distress. He understood that her anxiety was not merely about the tasks themselves, but about the many things, the endless stream of demands and expectations that threatened to overwhelm her. He would have allowed these words to sink in, to resonate within the quiet space of the room. The air would have felt thick with unspoken understanding, with the recognition of a truth that Martha, in her hurried state, might not have fully articulated even to herself. She was indeed anxious, she was indeed troubled, her mind a whirlwind of lists and duties, her spirit feeling the strain of trying to manage it all perfectly. Then, with a gentle shift in his tone, a subtle emphasis that drew all attention to the core of his message, he would have continued, offering a profound insight that would echo through the ages. But one thing is necessary. The words were simple, yet carried an immense weight, a distillation of spiritual wisdom into a single, crystalline truth. He was not negating the value of food, of shelter, of hospitality itself, but rather pointing to a deeper, more fundamental need that often gets lost amidst the clamor of daily life. His gaze would have shifted then, briefly, to Mary, still seated quietly at his feet, her face now a mixture of quiet attentiveness and a subtle, almost imperceptible, sense of relief. He was not praising Mary at Martha's expense, but rather illustrating the choice Mary had made, a choice that embodied this one thing necessary. He was showing Martha, through Mary's example, what that essential thing truly was. Mary has chosen the good portion, he would have said, the words a quiet affirmation, a gentle vindication of Mary's seemingly inactive presence. The term good portion would have resonated deeply in a culture where shared meals and hospitality were central. It evoked the idea of the best part of a meal, the most desirable share, the most nourishing sustenance. But here he was speaking not of physical food, but of spiritual nourishment, of something far more enduring and satisfying. He would have continued, his voice imbued with a quiet certainty which will not be taken away from her. This was the crucial distinction, the profound difference between the many things that Martha was troubled about and the one thing Mary had chosen. Martha's efforts, though noble and necessary in their own way, were temporal. The food would be eaten, the dishes washed, the house tidied, only for the cycle to begin again. These were things that could be consumed, that would eventually pass away. But Mary's choice, her attentive presence, her absorption in his words, was something eternal, something that would feed her spirit in a way that no amount of physical sustenance ever could. The implication was clear. While Martha's service was valuable, it was Mary's choice that held enduring spiritual significance. It was a gentle reordering of priorities, a tender invitation to Martha to consider what truly sustained the soul, what truly mattered in the long run. It was not a condemnation of work, but an elevation of presence, of listening, of spiritual communion. Martha would have stood there, perhaps still holding a cloth in her hand, her movement stilled, her mind grappling with the unexpected depth of his response. The initial sting of her frustration might have begun to recede, replaced by a quiet contemplation of his words. The idea that there was one thing necessary, a good portion that would not be taken away, would have been a profound thought to ponder, especially for someone whose life was so deeply intertwined with the fleeting, demanding necessities of daily existence. The quiet hum of the house would have returned, the sounds of the evening settling in once more. The aroma of the cooking food would have continued to waft from the kitchen, a reminder of the meal that still needed to be finished, the hunger that still needed to be satisfied. But now, perhaps, the pressure would have felt a little different. The weight of expectation might have eased, replaced by a subtle shift in perspective. Mary, still seated, would have felt a wave of quiet gratitude wash over her. Her choice, which might have felt implicitly criticized by her sister, had been gently affirmed, not as a superior path, but as a deeply valuable one. She would have looked at Jesus, her eyes reflecting a profound sense of understanding and peace, her heart filled with the quiet joy of having chosen to sit and listen, to absorb the wisdom that flowed from him. The evening would have continued, the light outside dimming to a deep indigo, the stars beginning to prick through the velvet sky. Lamps would have been lit, casting a warm, flickering glow across the faces of the disciples and the two sisters. The meal, when it was finally served, would have been eaten in the soft glow of these lamps, the conversations quieter, perhaps, than they might have been, imbued with the lingering resonance of Jesus' gentle words. The bread, the lentils, the wine would have nourished their bodies, but the words spoken earlier would have nourished their souls, a quiet feast of understanding that transcended the physical. The air in the room, once thick with Martha's anxiety, would have settled into a more peaceful calm. The sounds of eating, the soft clinking of pottery, the quiet murmuring of conversation, would have blended into a harmonious hum. Martha, though still serving, might have moved with a slightly lighter step, her mind perhaps still turning over Jesus' words, beginning to understand the profound truth he had offered. The many things still needed to be done, but perhaps they no longer held the same power to trouble her. The one thing necessary had been named, a quiet anchor in the midst of life's endless demands. The scent of warm bread, the gentle flicker of the oil lamps, the distant call of a night bird from the olive groves, all contributed to a deepening sense of peace, a quiet invitation to rest, to reflect, to simply be present in the moment, allowing the day's events to slowly, gently drift away into the quiet expanse of the night. Till flicker of the oil lamps, the distant call of a night bird from the olive groves, all contributed to a deepening sense of peace, a quiet invitation to rest, to reflect, to simply be present in the moment, allowing the day's events to slowly, gently drift away into the quiet expanse of the night. The next morning, the village of Bethany began to stir with the first blush of dawn, a soft, pearlescent light painting the eastern sky above the Judean hills, chasing away the lingering shadows from the narrow pathways and the ancient stone walls of the houses. A faint chill still clung to the air, a memory of the night, but the promise of the sun's warmth was already palpable, a gentle stirring that brought with it the scent of damp earth, of wood smoke from early cooking fires, and the faint, sweet perfume of jasmine that often entwined itself around the doorways of these humble homes. The first sounds were soft, the distant bleating of a goat, the rustle of straw as a donkey shifted in its stall, the quiet clatter of a clay pot being placed on a hearth, all weaving together into the gentle symphony of a new day awakening in a land steeped in ancient rhythms. Within Martha's home, the preparations for the day had already begun, long before the sun had fully cleared the horizon, for hospitality in this culture was not merely a gesture but a profound duty, a sacred trust, especially when one was hosting a revered teacher and his many disciples. Martha, ever practical, ever mindful of the myriad details that ensured comfort and provision, would have been up before anyone else, her movements quiet and efficient, her hands already busy with the tasks that lay before her. Perhaps she was grinding grain for the morning's bread, the rhythmic scrape of stone against stone a low, comforting hum in the stillness of the pre-dawn house, or perhaps she was stoking the embers of the cooking fire, coaxing them back to life with a gentle breath, watching the tiny sparks dance upwards like ephemeral stars. Her thoughts, even in those quiet moments, would have been a tapestry of practical concerns. How many loaves would be needed? How much water to draw from the village well? What vegetables were fresh from the garden? How to ensure that every guest, especially the master, felt welcomed and well cared for? This was her way, her expression of love and devotion, a deep-seated desire to serve, to provide, to create an atmosphere of comfort and abundance for those she cherished. Her home, after all, was her domain, her sanctuary, and she took immense pride in its order and its warmth, seeing in every well-prepared meal, every clean surface, every thoughtful detail, a reflection of her own heart. The very act of service was, for Martha, a form of prayer, a tangible offering of her time, her energy, her very being. As the sun began to cast longer, warmer rays through the small, unglazed windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and warming the cool stone floors, the house would slowly begin to fill with the quiet sounds of awakening. The disciples, having likely slept on mats rolled out on the floor or perhaps in an adjoining room, would stir, their low murmurs and the rustle of their cloaks adding to the gentle hum of the morning. And then there was Mary, her sister, whose presence in the household was a counterpoint to Martha's industriousness, a different kind of energy, a quieter, more contemplative spirit. Mary, perhaps, would have been among the first to rise as well, but her morning ritual might have been different, less focused on the immediate demands of the household and more attuned to the inner landscape of her own heart and mind. One could imagine her slipping out into the cool morning air, perhaps to a small courtyard or a quiet corner of the garden, to simply breathe in the freshness of the new day, to watch the sky transition from soft pastels to a vibrant blue, to listen to the first birdsong. Or perhaps she would have found a quiet spot within the house itself, a corner where the light fell just so, and there she would sit, her hands folded, her gaze soft, her mind already turning towards the teachings she had heard the previous evening, allowing the words to settle deep within her, like seeds planted in fertile soil. Her heart, one might surmise, was already drawn to the presence of Jesus, not just as a guest, but as the source of a profound wisdom that resonated deeply within her soul. She was not indifferent to the practical needs of the household, certainly not, for she loved her sister and understood the weight of Martha's responsibilities, but her primary impulse, her deepest longing, was to be near the Master, to absorb every word, every nuance of his presence. This was not a conscious choice to shirk duty, but an almost involuntary pull, like a moth to a flame, an undeniable hunger for spiritual nourishment that transcended the more immediate, tangible hungers of the body. As the morning progressed, and the household became more fully awake, the air would fill with the rich, earthy aroma of freshly baked bread, the sweet scent of dates, and the sharp, invigorating smell of olives and herbs, all mingling with the faint, ever-present scent of dust and ancient stone. The disciples, gathering in the main leaving area, would engage in quiet conversation, their voices low and respectful, perhaps discussing the previous day's journey, or the parables Jesus had shared, or the questions that had arisen in their own hearts. Their simple morning meal would be taken with a quiet reverence, a shared communion around a low table, perhaps on woven mats on the floor, the breaking of bread a familiar and comforting ritual. And then, as the day began to unfold more fully, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting stronger, more direct light into the house, Jesus would begin to teach. He would sit, as was customary for a rabbi, perhaps on a low cushion or a simple stool, his voice calm and resonant, filling the space not with booming pronouncements, but with a quiet authority that drew all who listened into its gentle current. The disciples would gather around him, their faces rapt, their minds open, eager to receive the wisdom that flowed so effortlessly from his lips. It was during one of these teaching sessions, perhaps later in the morning when the sun was warm and the air was still, that Mary would invariably find her place. She would not be in the kitchen, bustling with Martha, nor would she be tending to the myriad chores that always seemed to demand attention in a busy household. Instead, she would be found at the feet of Jesus, a position of humility and devotion, a posture that signified her profound respect and her eagerness to learn. Her eyes would be fixed on his face, her expression one of deep concentration, her entire being attuned to his words. One could almost see her absorbing his teaching not just with her ears, but with her very spirit, allowing the truth to sink deep into the quiet chambers of her heart. The atmosphere around Jesus as he taught was always one of profound peace, a stillness that seemed to emanate from him, quieting the usual clamor of the world. The sounds of the village, the distant cries of street vendors, the braying of a donkey, the laughter of children playing in the alleyways, would all seem to recede, becoming mere background whispers against the clear, steady flow of his voice. For Mary, this was the most precious time, the most vital nourishment. She was not merely listening, she was drinking in, she was immersing herself, allowing the wisdom to wash over her, to cleanse and refresh her spirit. Meanwhile, in the bustling heart of the home, Martha's world was a symphony of movement and purpose. The kitchen, a simple room typically with an open hearth for cooking, would be a hive of activity. The air would be thick with the rich aromas of simmering stews, the sharp tang of freshly cut herbs, the warm, yeasty smell of rising dough. Her hands, strong and capable, would be a blur of motion, kneading, chopping, stirring, fetching. She would be overseeing the preparation of a substantial meal, not just for Jesus and his 12 closest disciples, but likely for a larger company, as word of his presence in Bethany would have undoubtedly spread, drawing others who wished to hear him or simply to catch a glimpse of the revered teacher. The logistics alone would have been daunting. Water had to be drawn from the well, perhaps a short walk from the house, the heavy clay jars balanced on her hip or head, the cool liquid sloshing gently within. Fuel for the fire, likely dried dung cakes or bundles of brushwood, would need to be replenished. Vegetables from the small garden, perhaps lentils, chickpeas, onions, and garlic, would need to be cleaned and prepared. Bread, the staple of every meal, would be baked in a clay oven, its heat radiating outwards, warming the entire space. The rhythmic thud of a pestle in a mortar as spices were ground, the gentle hiss of oil in a hot pan, the soft clatter of earthenware dishes, all these sounds would have filled Martha's world, each one a testament to her tireless effort. Her mind, unlike Mary's, would be a whirlwind of calculations and priorities. Had the bread risen enough? Was the stew seasoned properly? Were there enough serving dishes? Where would everyone sit? How could she ensure that the master, above all, was comfortable and well fed? She would move with a sense of urgency, a quiet determination, her brow perhaps furrowed with the weight of her responsibilities. This was not a burden she resented, not truly, for it was her way of expressing her deep devotion, her love for Jesus and for her brother Lazarus and her sister Mary, a commitment to the ancient traditions of hospitality that were so deeply ingrained in her culture. However, as the hours wore on, and the demand seemed to multiply, a subtle shift would begin to occur within Martha. The initial joy of service, the quiet satisfaction of productive labor, would slowly begin to be overshadowed by a growing sense of frustration, a creeping weariness. She would glance into the main room, where Jesus sat teaching, surrounded by his attentive listeners, and her gaze would inevitably fall upon Mary, sitting so serenely at his feet, seemingly oblivious to the mounting chaos in the kitchen. A sigh, perhaps, would escape her lips, unnoticed by others, a small exhalation of exasperation. The contrast between her own bustling, sweat-streaked reality and Mary's tranquil absorption would become increasingly stark, increasingly difficult to ignore. The sounds of the teaching, the calm cadence of Jesus' voice, would reach her in fragmented whispers, tantalizingly close yet frustratingly out of reach, for her hands and her mind were tethered to the tangible, the immediate, the pressing demands of the meal. The heat from the cooking fire, the steam from the bubbling pots, the constant movement, the weight of the tasks, all would contribute to a rising tide of physical and emotional fatigue. Her initial enthusiasm, her willing dedication, would begin to fray at the edges, replaced by a sense of being overwhelmed, of being alone in her efforts. She might pause for a moment, wiping a stray wisp of hair from her forehead with the back of her hand, her eye scanning the array of half-prepared dishes, the unwashed vessels, the endless list of things still to be done. And then, the internal monologue would begin, a quiet, insistent voice in her mind, articulating the unfairness of it all. Why is Mary not helping? Does she not see the work that needs to be done? Does she not understand the importance of preparing a proper meal for our guests, for the Master himself? The questions would swirl, each one adding to her growing sense of indignation, of feeling unappreciated, even abandoned, in her efforts. It was not a malicious thought, not truly, but born of a profound weariness and a deep-seated belief in the necessity of her own actions. In her cultural context, the division of labor was often clear. While both men and women contributed to the household, the preparation of food and the management of domestic affairs were primarily the domain of women. And within a sisterly dynamic, especially in a home without a mother figure, the expectation would be that both sisters would share in these responsibilities. Mary's choice, therefore, to sit and listen rather than to assist, would have been seen by Martha not just as a personal slight, but as a transgression against the established norms of hospitality and familial duty. The scent of roasting vegetables, the rich aroma of lamb stew, the warm, comforting smell of fresh bread, which moments before had been sources of pride, now seemed to mock her, reminding her of the sheer volume of work that still lay ahead. Her movements, once fluid and purposeful, might become a little more abrupt, a little more forceful, the clatter of a pot a little louder, a subtle outward manifestation of the inner turmoil brewing within her. Finally, the frustration would reach a tipping point. She could no longer bear the perceived imbalance, the quiet injustice. With a determined breath, perhaps wiping her hands on her apron, she would leave the bustling warmth of the kitchen, stepping into the main room where Jesus was still teaching, his voice a steady, calming presence. The transition from the heat and activity of the kitchen to the quiet, contemplative atmosphere of the teaching space would be stark, almost jarring. Her entrance would likely cause a subtle ripple in the otherwise still gathering. The disciples, accustomed to the quiet reverence of these moments, might glance up, their expressions a mixture of surprise and perhaps a touch of apprehension, sensing the shift in energy that Martha carried with her. Mary, still seated at Jesus' feet, her gaze fixed on him, might not even fully register her sister's presence at first, so deeply immersed was she in the teaching. Martha would approach Jesus directly, her posture conveying a mixture of deference and a barely contained exasperation. Her voice, when she spoke, would likely be respectful, but with an underlying current of complaint, a plea for understanding, for intervention. The words would tumble out, perhaps a little faster than she intended, driven by the accumulated weight of her efforts and her sense of unfairness. Lord, she would begin, her voice perhaps a little strained, a little higher than usual. Do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? The question, though addressed to Jesus, was clearly directed at Mary, a public appeal for validation and assistance. The phrasing itself was telling, implying a neglect of duty, a lack of consideration. Tell her then to help me. It was not a request, but an instruction, an expectation that Jesus, as the revered teacher, would uphold the established order, would correct what she perceived as an imbalance, a dereliction of responsibility. The air in the room would suddenly feel thick, charged with the unspoken tension. All eyes would turn to Jesus, awaiting his response. The disciples, accustomed to his gentle wisdom, would perhaps wonder how he would navigate this delicate domestic dispute, this very human moment of sibling friction played out in the presence of the Master. Mary, finally realizing the focus of her sister's distress, would perhaps lift her head, her expression a mixture of surprise and perhaps a dawning understanding of Martha's long-simmering frustration. Jesus, however, would not react with anger or impatience. His gaze, when it fell upon Martha, would be one of profound compassion, of gentle understanding, seeing beyond the immediate complaint to the weary heart beneath. He would see her exhaustion, her dedication, her deep desire to serve, and also the anxiety that had begun to overshadow her good intentions. There would be no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet, penetrating wisdom that sought to illuminate a deeper truth. He would pause, perhaps, allowing the full weight of Martha's words to settle in the silence, allowing the tension in the room to slowly dissipate before he spoke. His voice, when it came, would be soft, gentle, devoid of any harshness, yet imbued with an unmistakable authority that commanded attention. "Martha, Martha," he would say, the repetition of her name a tender, almost melodic cadence, a way of drawing her in, of acknowledging her, of soothing her agitated spirit. It was an address that conveyed both affection and a gentle chiding, a recognition of her earnestness coupled with an invitation to look beyond the immediate. "You are worried and bothered about so many things." His words would cut through the layers of her complaint, going straight to the heart of her inner state. He did not deny her efforts, nor did he dismiss the validity of her concerns about hospitality. Instead, he gently pointed to the effect of those concerns on her own spirit, the way her dedication had transformed into anxiety, her service into a burden. He saw not just the busy hands, but the troubled mind, the heart that had become entangled in the multitude of tasks. The phrase "worried and bothered" would resonate deeply, for it perfectly captured the essence of her internal struggle. She was not merely busy, she was anxious, her peace of mind disturbed by the endless demands, her focus scattered across 1,000 details. The Greek word used, merimnao, often implies an anxious distraction, a mind pulled in different directions, a state of being unsettled and troubled. And thoribaso, translated as bothered or troubled, suggests a state of agitation, of being disturbed by a commotion or a multitude of things. Jesus, with his profound insight, saw beyond the surface of her actions to the very core of her being. And then, he would offer the profound counterpoint, the gentle but firm redirection. But only one thing is necessary. These words, simple yet revolutionary, would hang in the air, inviting contemplation, challenging the very framework of Martha's priorities. In a culture where hospitality was paramount, where meticulous preparation was a sign of honor and respect, to declare that only one thing is necessary was a radical statement, a reordering of values. He would not elaborate immediately, allowing the truth of that statement to sink in, to resonate within the quiet of the room. The disciples, accustomed to his parables and his often challenging teachings, would listen intently, their minds perhaps already grappling with the implications of such a declaration. Mary, still at his feet, would likely have absorbed every word, her heart perhaps swelling with a quiet understanding, a confirmation of the path she had instinctively chosen. Mary has chosen the good part, he would continue, his gaze perhaps resting gently on Mary, then returning to Martha, which will not be taken away from her. This was not a condemnation of Martha's service, nor a dismissal of the importance of practical provision. Rather, it was an affirmation of Mary's choice, a recognition of the superior value of what she had prioritized. The good part, or better part as some translations render it, was not about being better than Martha, but about choosing that which possessed enduring value, that which fed the soul in a way that physical sustenance, however essential, could not. The phrase, "which will not be taken away from her," carried a profound weight. Material possessions, physical comforts, even the most meticulously prepared meals, are transient. They are consumed, they decay, they pass away. But the nourishment of the Spirit, the wisdom absorbed from the divine, the connection forged in the presence of the sacred, these are eternal, enduring, beyond the reach of time or circumstance. Mary's choice was not merely a preference for quiet contemplation over bustling activity, it was a choice for that which had lasting significance, that which would sustain her long after the meal was eaten and the guests had departed. Martha, in that moment, would likely feel a complex swirl of emotions. Perhaps a sting of disappointment, a sense of being misunderstood, for her intentions had been good, her efforts sincere. Yet, perhaps also a faint glimmer of understanding, a quiet recognition of the deeper truth in his words. She had sought to honor him through her service, through the tangible acts of hospitality, but Mary had sought to honor him through her presence, through her attentiveness to his words, through the nourishment of her spirit. And Jesus, in his infinite wisdom, affirmed that the latter was the one thing needful, the foundation upon which all other aspects of life, including service, should rest. The gentle rebuke, framed in such tender terms, was not meant to diminish Martha, but to elevate her perspective, to invite her into a deeper understanding of what truly mattered. It was an invitation to find the sacred not just in the doing, but in the being, not just in the providing, but in the receiving, not just in the serving, but in the listening. It was a call to prioritize the spiritual over the temporal, the eternal over the ephemeral, the quiet nourishment of the soul over the clamor of countless tasks. The silence that followed his words would be rich with meaning, a space for reflection, for the profound truths to settle. The sun would continue to climb, its warmth filling the room, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, the soft textures of the woven mats, the smooth coolness of the stone walls. The distant sounds of the village would slowly begin to reassert themselves, the gentle hum of leaves outside, but within the house, a different kind of quiet would prevail, a quiet born of understanding, of contemplation, of the gentle reordering of priorities. Mary, still at his feet, would remain in her posture of quiet reverence, her heart perhaps filled with a profound gratitude, a deep sense of peace that her choice, her deepest longing, had been affirmed by the Master himself. She had not chosen out of laziness or indifference, but out of a deep spiritual hunger, a recognition of the unique opportunity to be in the presence of divine wisdom. Her choice was an act of faith, a prioritization of the unseen over the seen, the eternal over the temporal. Martha, though perhaps still wrestling with the implications of his words, would likely feel a softening in her own heart. The immediate sting of her frustration would begin to recede, read by a quiet introspection. She would still have a meal to prepare, guests to serve, but perhaps now a subtle shift would occur within her, a new understanding that would inform her actions. The tasks would remain, but the anxiety, the worry, the sense of being bothered about so many things might begin to lessen, read by a renewed sense of purpose, a quiet dedication that was no longer overshadowed by internal turmoil. The aroma of the simmering stew, the scent of fresh bread, would still fill the air, but now, perhaps, they would carry a different meaning, a different resonance. They would be offerings, yes, but offerings made with a heart that was beginning to understand the deeper meaning of true hospitality, the profound significance of the one thing needful. The quiet hum of the household, the gentle murmur of conversation, the soft rustle of cloaks, the distant call of a night bird from the olive groves, all contributed to a deepening sense of peace, a quiet invitation to rest, to reflect, to simply be present in the moment, allowing the day's events to slowly, gently drift away into the quiet expanse of the night, carrying with them the soft echoes of wisdom, the gentle whispers of a truth that transcends the demands of the everyday, guiding the heart towards a deeper, more enduring peace, a quiet stillness that settles over the spirit like a warm, comforting blanket, inviting the mind to release its grip on the day's concerns, to float gently on the currents of peaceful thought, drifting slowly, softly, into a profound and restorative sleep. It was into this very atmosphere of quiet contemplation, of seeking that deeper peace, that the figure of Jesus often brought his teachings, his presence a gentle balm to the weary soul, much like the soft glow of a lamp in the deepening twilight. The village of Bethany, nestled just a short distance from the bustling, often overwhelming energy of Jerusalem, offered a sanctuary, a place where the sounds of city life faded into the distant hum of crickets and the rustling of olive leaves. It was here, in this small, sun-drenched settlement, that two sisters, Martha and Mary, lived in a home that had become, for Jesus and his disciples, a cherished haven, a place of respite from the dusty roads and the demanding crowds. Their house, like many in Judea at that time, would have been constructed from sun-baked mud bricks, perhaps whitewashed with lime, its flat roof a common gathering place in the cool evenings, offering views of the surrounding hillsides dotted with ancient olive trees and terraced vineyards. The air inside, even during the heat of the day, would have been cooler, thick with the scent of dried herbs hanging from rafters, perhaps a faint aroma of baking bread or simmering lentils from the hearth. The floor, lightly packed earth covered with woven mats, would have felt cool and smooth beneath bare feet, a welcome contrast to the rough, stony paths outside. Martha, the elder sister, carried the weight of the household with a diligent and capable spirit. Her hands, accustomed to the rhythm of daily tasks, moved with a practiced efficiency, arranging cushions, preparing meals, ensuring every guest felt welcomed and provided for. Her concern for hospitality was not merely a social custom, it was deeply ingrained in the culture of the time, a sacred duty, especially when hosting a revered teacher like Jesus and his entourage. The arrival of guests, particularly a group of men who had been traveling, meant a flurry of activity, water to be drawn from the village well, perhaps a short walk away, its stone lip worn smooth by generations of ropes and buckets, bread to be kneaded and baked in a clay oven, the heat radiating through the small kitchen, vegetables to be cleaned and chopped, and perhaps a lamb or a kid to be prepared if the occasion called for a more substantial feast. The sounds of her work would have been constant but not jarring, the rhythmic thud of a pestle in a mortar, the gentle clatter of earthenware bowls, the soft rustle of fabric as she moved through the rooms. Mary, on the other hand, possessed a different kind of attentiveness, one that drew her away from the immediate demands of the kitchen and towards the quiet presence of their guest. When Jesus entered their home, his voice, often described as gentle yet authoritative, would have filled the space with a sense of peace, a calm that seemed to settle over everything. The disciples, dusty from their journey, would have found places to sit, perhaps on low stools or cushions on the floor, their sandals left by the door. The light filtering in through small, high windows or through the open doorway would have cast long, shifting shadows across the room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the sunbeams. It was in this setting that Mary made her choice, a choice that, though seemingly simple, held a profound significance. While Martha was immersed in the preparations, her mind undoubtedly cataloguing the many tasks yet to be done, her body moving with purpose, Mary quietly took her place at Jesus' feet. This was not merely a casual posture, it was the traditional position of a student before a teacher, a disciple eager to absorb every word, every nuance of wisdom. Her gaze would have been fixed upon him, her hands perhaps clasped in her lap, her breathing slow and even, completely absorbed in the moment. The air around her would have felt still, almost hushed, as if even the dust motes paused in their dance to listen. Imagine the sounds that might have reached her ears, the gentle murmur of Jesus' voice, perhaps recounting a parable or explaining a passage from the ancient scriptures, his words flowing with a quiet authority that resonated deep within her spirit. She might have heard the soft rustle of his robes as he shifted slightly, the occasional cough from a disciple, or the distant bleating of a goat from outside. But these external sounds would have faded into the background, becoming mere whispers against the clear, strong current of his teaching. The scent of the oil lamp, perhaps already lit even in the late afternoon to ward off the encroaching shadows, would have mingled with the earthy smell of the house and the faint aroma of the meal Martha was preparing. As the moment stretched into a quiet eternity for Mary, for Martha, time was a relentless master, each tick demanding another action, another effort. The heat from the hearth, the steam from the cooking pots, the rising anxiety that everything might not be perfect for their esteemed guest would have pressed upon her. Her brow might have furrowed slightly, a bead of perspiration perhaps tracing a path down her temple as she stirred a pot of lentil stew or pounded spices for a savory dish. The rhythmic chopping of vegetables on a wooden board, the sizzle of oil in a pan, the clang of a metal pot against the stone hearth, these were the sounds of her devotion, her expression of hospitality. But as the minutes turned into what felt like an hour, and Mary remained steadfastly at Jesus' feet, Martha's patience began to fray. The cultural expectations of hospitality were immense, and for the hostess to be left alone with the entirety of the work, while her sister sat idly, was not only burdensome but also, in her mind, a breach of decorum. The unspoken question would have grown louder and louder in her thoughts. Does she not see all that needs to be done? Does she not care? The warmth of the kitchen, once a comforting embrace, would have begun to feel stifling, the aromas of food now tinged with the bitterness of resentment. Her steps, which had been swift and purposeful, might have become a little heavier, a little more deliberate, as she finally decided she could no longer bear the perceived injustice. She would have wiped her hands on a linen cloth, perhaps with a sigh that was barely audible, yet laden with frustration. Her gaze, as she approached Jesus, would have been a mixture of exasperation and a plea for understanding, for intervention. The air in the room, which had been so serene around Mary, would have subtly shifted, a faint ripple of tension emanating from Martha's presence. Her voice, when she spoke, would have been respectful, yet tinged with a clear note of complaint. "Lord," she might have begun, her tone carefully modulated to avoid outright rudeness, yet unable to conceal the strain. "Do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone?" The question hung in the air, a direct challenge, not just to Mary, but implicitly to Jesus himself, for allowing such an imbalance to persist. Her eyes would have darted from Jesus to Mary, hoping for a reaction, a flicker of understanding, a command for Mary to rise and assist. "Tell her then to help me." The words were a direct appeal, a request for him to exercise his authority, to restore what she perceived as the proper order of things. The silence that followed her outburst would have been profound, broken only by the distant sounds of the village, perhaps a dog barking or the gentle rustle of the wind through the olive trees. All eyes would have turned to Jesus, waiting for his response. Mary, who had been so utterly absorbed, would have likely stirred, perhaps a faint blush rising to her cheeks, her serenity momentarily disturbed by her sister's public complaint. She might have lowered her gaze, suddenly aware of the scrutiny, the unspoken judgment. Jesus' response, when it came, was not a sharp rebuke, nor was it a dismissal of Martha's efforts. His voice, still calm and gentle, would have carried a tone of deep understanding, a quiet compassion for her burdened spirit. "Martha, Martha," he would have said, the repetition of her name a soft echo, a tender invitation to pause and reflect. The sound of his voice would have been like a cool stream on a hot day, a soothing balm to her agitated spirit, even as his words gently redirected her focus. "You are anxious and troubled about many things," he continued, his gaze perhaps resting upon her, not with judgment, but with a profound empathy that saw beyond the bustling activity to the underlying worry. He understood the weight of her responsibilities, the cultural pressures, the genuine desire to provide a perfect welcome. He saw her heart, which was indeed devoted, but also overwhelmed. The phrase, anxious and troubled about many things, would have resonated with Martha, perhaps bringing a sudden, quiet recognition of the truth in his words. She was indeed caught in a whirlwind of details, her mind racing from one task to the next, her peace of mind sacrificed to the demands of the moment. The scent of the simmering stew, the warmth of the kitchen, the very things she was working so hard to perfect, might have suddenly felt heavy, oppressive. Then came the pivotal declaration, the quiet turning point in the narrative, delivered with the same gentle authority, but one thing is necessary. This one thing was not a dismissal of physical needs, nor a devaluation of Martha's hard work. It was a subtle yet profound reordering of priorities, an invitation to consider what truly nourishes the soul, what truly endures beyond the fleeting satisfaction of a perfectly prepared meal or an impeccably clean home. The words would have hung in the air, simple yet weighty, inviting contemplation. And then, with a quiet affirmation that would have brought a wave of relief to Mary, and perhaps a moment of stunned silence to Martha, he concluded, "Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her." The good portion was not a physical inheritance, not a share of the meal, but something far more valuable, something intangible yet deeply sustaining. It was the act of listening, of learning, of being present to the divine wisdom that was being offered. It was the nourishment of the spirit, the quiet stillness that allowed the soul to drink deeply from the wellspring of truth. For Mary, these words would have been a profound vindication, a quiet affirmation of her heart's deepest yearning. The blush on her cheeks might have faded, replaced by a serene glow, her gaze returning to Jesus with renewed devotion. The gentle hum of the house, the distant sounds of the village, would have once again receded, leaving only the resonant truth of his words. She had chosen to sit at the feet of the teacher, to absorb his wisdom, to allow her spirit to be fed, and in doing so, she had chosen a treasure that no amount of worldly effort could ever diminish or take away. For Martha, the words would have been a revelation, perhaps a moment of quiet introspection, a dawning realization that her frantic efforts, while well-intentioned, had obscured a deeper truth. The clatter of the pots, the sizzle of the food, the very symbols of her diligent service, might have suddenly seemed less important, less enduring, when measured against the one thing necessary. The warmth of the kitchen, the scent of the herbs, the familiar rhythm of her tasks, might have all taken on a new, quieter significance. She was not being condemned for her service, but gently redirected, invited to find a balance, to understand that even in the midst of necessary work, there is a deeper hunger of the soul that also demands attention. The story, in its quiet simplicity, offers a profound reflection on the human condition, on the constant tension between the demands of the outer world and the needs of the inner spirit. It speaks to the universal experience of feeling overwhelmed by tasks, by the endless to-do lists that clamor for our attention, pulling us away from moments of quiet contemplation, from the deeper nourishment that our souls crave. The sunlight filtering through the small window, illuminating the dust motes, might have seemed to slow its dance, the very air in the room holding its breath, as the quiet truth settled over the two sisters and their guest. This scene in Bethany, so intimately depicted, is not merely a historical anecdote, it is a timeless invitation to consider our own lives, our own priorities. Are we, like Martha, Often anxious and troubled about many things, our minds filled with the clamor of responsibilities, the pressure to perform, to achieve, to provide? Or do we, like Mary, find moments to sit at the feet of wisdom, to listen, to absorb, to allow our spirits to be nourished by that one thing necessary which transcends all earthly concerns? The quiet hum of the hearth, the gentle flicker of the oil lamp, the soft murmur of conversation, these sensory details would have enveloped the moment, creating an atmosphere ripe for introspection, for a gentle turning of the heart towards a deeper, more enduring peace, a quiet stillness that settles over the spirit like a warm, comforting blanket, inviting the mind to release its grip on the day's concerns, to float gently on the currents of peaceful thought, drifting slowly, softly, into a profound and restorative slumber. The sun, having climbed to its zenith, now began its slow, deliberate descent towards the western hills, casting longer shadows across the dusty paths of Bethany, a small village nestled just beyond the Mount of Olives, a mere 2 miles from the bustling, stone-laden city of Jerusalem. The air, which had shimmered with the midday heat, was beginning to soften, carrying the faint, earthy scent of sun-baked soil mingling with the fragrant aroma of wild thyme and the distant, sweet perfume of blossoming fig trees. A gentle breeze, almost imperceptible, stirred the leaves of the olive groves that dotted the landscape, creating a soft, rustling whisper that was easily lost amidst the hum of insects and the occasional bleating of a distant sheep. Within one of the modest, sun-warmed homes of Bethany, built of rough-hewn stone and plaster, with a flat roof often used for evening repose or drying herbs, a quiet scene was unfolding. The interior, though simple, spoke of a life lived with care and hospitality, its walls perhaps adorned with woven hangings in muted earth tones, and pottery vessels standing ready on shelves. The main room, open and airy, would have been swept clean, the floor likely packed earth or smooth stone, cool beneath bare feet. Here, in this humble dwelling, lived 2 sisters, Martha and Mary, and their brother Lazarus, whose lives were about to be touched by a presence that would forever alter the rhythm of their days and the quietude of their hearts. It was late in the afternoon, the time when the day's most arduous labors began to wound down, and the promise of evening, with its cooler air and the soft glow of oil lamps, started to beckon. The sounds of the village were muted, a distant donkey braying, the murmur of voices from a nearby courtyard, the rhythmic thud of a pestle in a mortar as someone prepared spices for the evening meal. Inside the sisters' home, the atmosphere was one of anticipation, a gentle hum of activity that bespoke an honored guest. Martha, the elder sister, was a woman of practical devotion, her hands accustomed to the daily tasks of maintaining a household, of preparing meals, of ensuring comfort and order. Her movements were purposeful, her mind already mapping out the sequence of preparations necessary to extend a fitting welcome. She might have been in the kitchen area, a small, enclosed space typically at the back of the house, where a clay oven, still radiating residual heat from the morning's baking, stood beside a stone hearth. The air here would have been thick with the warm, savory sense of cooking, perhaps the aroma of freshly baked bread, still warm from the oven, its crust golden and inviting, or the rich, earthy smell of lentils simmering gently in a clay pot, seasoned with onions and garlic. She would have been kneading dough for more bread, her strong hands working the resilient mass, feeling its elasticity, or perhaps she was grinding grain with a heavy stone quern, the rhythmic rasping sound a familiar backdrop to her thoughts. Her hair, likely pulled back neatly from her face, might have had a few stray strands escaping, dusted faintly with flour, a testament to her diligence. Her simple tunic, woven from natural fibers, would have been practical, allowing her freedom of movement as she moved between the hearth, the water jar, and the preparation table. She would have been thinking of the needs of her guests, particularly the esteemed rabbi from Nazareth, whose reputation for wisdom and compassion had spread throughout Judea and Galilee. To host such a one was an honor, a sacred duty, and Martha approached it with the full weight of her dedication. She would have been envisioning the table spread with the best she had to offer: fresh olives, perhaps some dried figs or dates, a simple fish dish if it could be procured, and plenty of bread, the staple of every meal. There would be water, drawn from the village well, cool and refreshing, and perhaps a little wine. Every detail, from the cleanliness of the serving dishes to the arrangement of the cushions around the low table, would have been carefully considered in her mind, a quiet symphony of hospitality playing out in her thoughts. Meanwhile, Mary, the younger sister, possessed a different kind of spirit, one that gravitated towards quiet contemplation and the profound resonance of words. She was not in the kitchen, her hands busy with the tangible preparations of the meal. Instead, she was seated on the floor, perhaps on a woven mat or a soft cushion, near the feet of their distinguished guest. The light filtering in through the doorway, softened by the late afternoon sun, would have illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air, creating a gentle, almost ethereal glow around them. The rabbi, whose presence was often described as both commanding and profoundly gentle, would have been speaking, his voice a calm, steady flow, not loud, but carrying an authority that drew listeners in. He might have been recounting parables, stories woven with the fabric of everyday life, to the sower and the seed, the lost sheep, the prodigal son, to each tale holding layers of meaning, inviting reflection. Or perhaps he was speaking of the kingdom of God, not as a distant political entity, but as a present reality, a way of living, a state of being. His words would have been like cool water to a thirsty soul, or a warm balm to a weary spirit, offering comfort, challenging assumptions, and inviting a deeper understanding of life's true purpose. Mary, in that moment, was utterly absorbed. Her gaze would have been fixed on him, her expression one of profound attentiveness, her head perhaps tilted slightly, catching every inflection, every nuance of his voice. Her hands, unlike Martha's, were still, perhaps clasped gently in her lap, or resting lightly on the floor beside her. She was not merely listening with her ears, she was listening with her whole being, her heart open, receptive, like fertile ground ready to receive the seed of his wisdom. The world outside, with its chores and its demands, had receded for her. The clatter of pots from the kitchen, the distant sounds of the village, even the gentle shifting of other listeners who might have gathered, all faded into an indistinct background hum. For Mary, there was only the voice, the message, and the quiet, profound connection that transcended the ordinary. This was a scene not uncommon in ancient Judea, where rabbis traveled from village to village, teaching in synagogues, in homes, by the roadside, wherever people gathered. Their teachings were often delivered orally, memorized and passed down, and the act of listening, of truly absorbing the words of a revered teacher, was considered a high form of devotion. Women, traditionally, had a more limited role in public religious discourse, but in the private setting of a home, especially one that welcomed a teacher like this rabbi, the boundaries could soften. Mary's position at his feet was not just a physical posture, it was a symbolic one, indicating her role as a disciple, a learner, an eager recipient of his instruction. This was a privilege, a rare opportunity, and she embraced it with every fiber of her being. As the afternoon wore on, and the shadows grew longer, Martha's activity in the kitchen intensified. The aroma of her cooking would have grown stronger, more enticing, filling the small home with the promise of a nourishing meal. She would have been moving with a quiet urgency, her brow perhaps furrowed slightly in concentration, a faint flush on her cheeks from the heat of the hearth. She might have been slicing fresh cucumbers and tomatoes for a simple salad, or preparing a dish of roasted vegetables, their colors vibrant against the earthenware. The rhythmic sound of her knife against a wooden board, the gentle sizzle of oil in a pan, the clinking of pottery, to these were the sounds of her love, her service, her expression of hospitality. Yet, as she worked, a subtle tension began to build within her. She would glance towards the main room, where Mary remained, seemingly oblivious to the mounting tasks. Martha saw her sister, still unattentive, lost in the flow of words, and a feeling of exasperation, gentle at first, began to prick at her. There was so much to do, so many details to attend to, and she was doing it all alone. The weight of responsibility, the desire to make everything perfect for their esteemed guest, pressed upon her. It was not that she begrudged Mary her spiritual devotion, but at this moment, with the sun dipping lower and hunger beginning to stir in the stomachs of their guests, practical needs seemed to demand attention. The cultural expectations of hospitality in that era were immense. To host a guest, especially a respected teacher, was a matter of honor and social duty. The host was expected to provide generously, to ensure comfort, and to anticipate every need. Martha, as the mistress of the house, felt the full weight of these expectations. She was not just preparing a meal, she was upholding the family's reputation, demonstrating her respect for the guest, and fulfilling a deeply ingrained cultural imperative. And in her mind, Mary's inaction was not just a personal choice, it was a dereliction of shared duty, a slight to their guest, and a burden placed squarely on Martha's shoulders. The sounds from the kitchen, which had been a quiet hum, might have become a little more pronounced now to a slightly sharper clatter of a pot, a more emphatic thud of a pestle. These subtle shifts in rhythm, though perhaps unnoticed by Mary in her deep absorption, were outward manifestations of Martha's growing internal struggle. She loved her sister, of course, and she revered the rabbi, but the demands of the moment were overwhelming her capacity for quiet patience. Finally, the tension reached a point where Martha could no longer contain it. She wiped her hands on her apron, perhaps taking a deep, fortifying breath, and walked from the kitchen into the main room, her footsteps perhaps a little more deliberate than usual. The contrast between her bustling, purposeful energy and Mary's serene stillness would have been striking. She approached the rabbi, not directly accusing Mary, but appealing to him, the authority figure, to intervene. Her voice, though perhaps softened by respect for her guest, would have carried an edge of weariness, a hint of frustration. "Lord," she might have begun, her words carefully chosen, "do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone?" The question was rhetorical, an expression of her feeling of being overlooked, of her efforts going unacknowledged. Then, more directly, she would have added, "Tell her to help me." It was a plea, a demand, an appeal for justice in the face of what she perceived as an imbalance of labor and responsibility. The air in the room would have seemed to thicken slightly, the quiet hum of conversation perhaps faltering for a moment. All eyes, including Mary's, would have turned towards the rabbi, waiting for his response. It was a delicate situation, a domestic dispute brought before a spiritual teacher, and his reaction would set the tone for the moment. The rabbi, however, did not immediately scold Mary or instruct her to rise and assist her sister. Instead, his gaze, full of understanding and a gentle compassion, turned towards Martha. He saw her earnestness, her diligence, her desire to serve well. He recognized the weight of her responsibilities, the cultural pressures she felt. He understood her weariness, her frustration. He did not dismiss her efforts or her feelings. His voice, when he spoke, was not one of rebuke, but of tender observation, a quiet invitation to a different perspective. "Martha, Martha," he said, repeating her name, a common form of address that conveyed both affection and a gentle urgency. "You are anxious and troubled about many things." His words were not an accusation, but a simple, profound statement of truth, cutting through the layers of her immediate frustration to the deeper state of her heart. He saw beyond the tasks to the underlying anxiety that fueled her busyness. The word anxious, meronatius in Greek, suggests a distracted worry, a mind pulled in many directions, while the troubled, thorabase, implies agitation, a bustling disturbance of the spirit. He continued, his voice soft, yet firm in its insight, "But one thing is needful." This was the core of his teaching, the gentle redirection of her focus. He was not devaluing her service, her hospitality, or the importance of a well-prepared meal. These were good things, necessary things, acts of love. But he was pointing to something beyond them, something that underpinned all other good things, something that brought true peace and lasting nourishment. And then he turned his gaze, perhaps briefly, towards Mary, who would have been listening intently, her heart perhaps sinking slightly at her sister's complaint, but now lifting with the unexpected turn of the rabbi's words. "Mary has chosen the good portion," he affirmed, "which will not be taken away from her." This good portion, Agathan Merida, was not a physical share of food or inheritance, but a spiritual inheritance, a profound connection, a deep understanding. In ancient Jewish culture, the portion often referred to one's lot or inheritance, sometimes even one's share in the temple sacrifices. Here, the rabbi was elevating Mary's choice to listen, to learn, to absorb his teachings, to a position of supreme value, a treasure that could not be lost or consumed or diminished by time or circumstance. It was a portion of eternal significance, a direct engagement with the source of life and truth. The implication was clear: Martha's many concerns, though born of good intentions, were transient. The meal would be eaten, the dishes washed, the house returned to order, and then new tasks would arise. Her efforts, while commendable, were bound to the fleeting demands of the physical world. Mary's choice, however, was to nourish her spirit, to feed her soul with words of eternal leave, a nourishment that would sustain her far beyond the present moment, a quiet strength that would endure. The silence that followed his words would have been profound, filled with the gentle weight of his wisdom. Martha, perhaps, felt a quiet shift within her, a moment of recognition, even if the immediate sting of her frustration still lingered. Mary, on the other hand, would have felt a quiet validation, a deep sense of peace settling over her, confirming the rightness of her choice, not as a rejection of her sister, but as an affirmation of her own spiritual yearning. This interaction, brief as it was, became a pivotal moment, not just for the sisters, but for countless generations who would reflect upon its meaning. It was not a condemnation of work or service, for the rabbi himself was served and often ministered to the physical needs of others. Rather, it was a gentle reordering of priorities, a reminder that amidst the clamor of daily responsibilities, there is a deeper hunger, a more essential need that often goes unaddressed. It was an invitation to pause, to listen, to connect with the source of true life, even when the demands of the world press in. The sun continued its slow journey towards the horizon, painting the western sky with hues of soft orange and rose, casting long, purple shadows across the olive groves. The air grew cooler, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from distant cooking fires, and the chirping of crickets began to emerge, a gentle chorus accompanying the transition from day to night. Inside the house, the atmosphere, though touched by the brief exchange, would have settled back into a quieter rhythm. Martha, perhaps with a sigh, might have returned to her preparations, but perhaps with a slightly different perspective, a quiet seed of reflection planted in her heart. Mary would have remained by the rabbi's feet, her attention once again fully absorbed, the words washing over her like a gentle tide, carrying away the last vestiges of the day's concerns, inviting her spirit to drift into a deeper, more profound sense of peace and understanding. The evening would have progressed, the meal eventually served, simple yet nourishing, shared in the soft glow of oil lamps, their flickering light casting dancing shadows on the walls. The conversation would have continued, perhaps more subdued, but rich with meaning. The sounds of the village would have faded further, replaced by the gentle murmur of voices within the house, the occasional clink of a pottery cup, the soft rustle of garments. The air would have grown cool, inviting a sense of quiet introspection, a drawing inward. As the hours passed, and the stars began to emerge, countless pinpricks of light against the velvet blackness of the Judean sky, the lessons of the day would have settled into the hearts of those present. For Martha, it was a gentle reminder to seek balance, to find moments of stillness amidst the necessary busyness, to remember that true hospitality extends beyond the physical comforts to the nourishment of the soul. For Mary, it was an affirmation of her deepest inclinations, a permission to prioritize the spiritual, to sit at the feet of wisdom and drink deeply from its wellspring. The house, now quiet save for the gentle breathing of its occupants, would have held the lingering scent of the evening meal, mingled with the faint, sweet aroma of burning oil from the lamps. The world outside would have been bathed in moonlight, the olive tree silvered, the paths softened by shadow. The distant sounds of night animals, a hooting owl, the rustle of a nocturnal creature in the undergrowth, would have added to the serene symphony of the night. Sleep, for those in the house, would have come as a welcome embrace, a quiet descent into rest, carrying with it the echoes of the day's profound teachings, the gentle cadence of the rabbi's voice, the warmth of shared presence, and the quiet understanding that some things, though seemingly small, hold an immeasurable value, a lasting comfort that settles deep within the spirit, inviting a profound and restorative sleep. The sun, now a tired orange, began its slow descent behind the low, rolling hills that cradle Bethany, casting long, stretching shadows across the dusty path leading to Martha's home. A soft, golden light filtered through the open doorway, illuminating the small, bustling space within, where the air was thick with the scent of baking bread, simmering stews, and the earthy aroma of dried herbs hanging from the rafters. The day's heat, which had clung to the air with a persistent embrace, was beginning to yield to the evening's gentle coolness, a welcome relief that stirred a faint, sweet breeze through the olive groves just beyond the village's edge, rustling the leaves with a hushed, almost imperceptible whisper. Inside, Martha moved with a practiced grace, her hands a blur of motion as she prepared the evening meal for her esteemed guests. The clatter of earthenware pots, the rhythmic thud of a pestle in a mortar grinding spices, and the soft sizzle of oil in a clay pan formed a domestic symphony, a familiar soundtrack to her leave. Her brow was furrowed ever so slightly, not in anger, but in the quiet intensity of her focus, her mind already several steps ahead, planning the next dish, ensuring every detail was just so. She envisioned the table laden with warm, fresh-baked flatbread, perhaps still steaming from the hearth, alongside a hearty lentil stew, rich with vegetables from their small garden, and a bowl of sweet, ripe figs, a rare treat. Hospitality, in their culture, was not merely a duty but a sacred art, a profound expression of honor and love, and Martha, with her deep-seated sense of responsibility, took immense pride in perfecting it, believing that a well-fed guest was a truly honored guest, their comfort and satisfaction a reflection of her devotion. She imagined the rabbi, weary from his travels and his tireless teaching, finding solace and strength in the abundance she provided, his disciples too, their faces perhaps still alight with the day's lessons, their stomachs rumbling with a healthy appetite. The thought spurred her on, lending an extra measure of energy to her movements, as she reached for a clay jar filled with cool water, ready to mix with wine for the evening's refreshment, the sound of the liquid gurgling softly as it poured. Meanwhile, in the small, sun-dappled courtyard, or perhaps just within the threshold of the main room, Mary remained seated, her posture still, her eyes fixed on the rabbi. The golden light of the setting sun painted the scene with a warm, ethereal glow, highlighting the dust motes dancing in the air and the intricate patterns woven into the simple rugs on the floor. She was utterly absorbed, her gaze unwavering, drinking in every word, every nuance of his expression, every gentle gesture of his hands as he spoke. The world outside, with its pressing demands and practical concerns, seemed to recede into a distant hum, replaced by the profound quietude of her own inner world, where the rabbi's words resonated like deep, clear bells. She felt a sense of profound peace, a stillness that settled deep within her bones, as if she had finally found the very core of her being, a place of pure, unadulterated presence. The stories he told, the parables he wove, were not just tales but living truths that illuminated the hidden corners of her heart, revealing new pathways of understanding, new dimensions of faith. She wasn't merely listening, she was experiencing, allowing his wisdom to seep into her spirit, to nourish her soul in a way that no earthly food ever could. The gentle murmur of his voice, low and resonant, was like a lullaby to her spirit, calming the restless currents of her mind, inviting a deep and abiding sense of belonging. The air around them carried the faint, sweet scent of jasmine from a climbing vine near the doorway, mingled with the more distant, earthy aroma of the cooking from the kitchen, a subtle reminder of Martha's diligent efforts. Yet, for Mary, these sensory details were peripheral, soft edges to the sharp, luminous focus of her attention. She was aware of the warmth of the evening air, the texture of the rough woven mat beneath her, the distant bleating of a sheep from a nearby fold, but these sensations were like distant echoes, unable to pull her away from the magnetic pull of the rabbi's presence. As time stretched on, marked only by the deepening shadows and the slow, deliberate turning of the evening, Martha's movements grew a little more hurried, a subtle tension beginning to gather in her shoulders. The aroma of the stew was now rich and inviting, the bread was cooling on a wooden board, and the table was almost ready, but a crucial element was missing: help. She glanced towards the courtyard, her eyes falling upon Mary, still seated, still wrapped, seemingly oblivious to the growing demands of the hour. A small sigh, almost imperceptible, escaped her lips, a mixture of exasperation and a deep-seated desire for things to be just right, for everything to be in its proper place. In their culture, the division of labor was clear, especially when guests were present. The women of the household bore the primary responsibility for preparing and serving the meal, ensuring the comfort of all. It was a matter of honor, a demonstration of respect, and a cornerstone of their communal leave. Martha, as the elder sister and the mistress of the house, felt the weight of this expectation keenly. She pictured the disciples, their eyes perhaps already straying towards the kitchen, their hunger growing with the enticing smells, and a quiet urgency began to bubble within her. She imagined the disapproving glances, the unspoken judgments if the meal were not served promptly, if the hospitality were anything less than perfect. It was not just her own reputation at stake, but the honor of her family, the respect due to their esteemed guest. The thought was a small, insistent prickle, urging her to action, to rectify the imbalance she perceived. She loved her sister deeply, but at this moment, a quiet frustration began to bloom, a feeling that Mary was simply not seeing what needed to be done, that she was neglecting her duties in favor of something less tangible, less immediate. The clatter of a dropped spoon, a sudden, sharp sound in the otherwise rhythmic kitchen, brought Martha to a temporary halt. She straightened up, wiping her hands on her apron, her gaze once more drawn to Mary. The contrast was stark. Martha, flushed from the heat of the hearth, her hands busy, her mind racing with practicalities. Mary, serene and still, her face illuminated by an inner light, her mind seemingly lost in the depths of spiritual contemplation. It was as if they were inhabiting two entirely different worlds, separated by an invisible, yet increasingly palpable, barrier. A quiet indignation began to stir within Martha. Was it fair, she wondered, that she should bear the entire burden of hospitality while her sister sat idly by, enjoying the very presence that Martha was working so hard to facilitate? The question, though unspoken, hung in the air between them, a subtle vibration of unspoken tension. She longed for the shared effort, the quiet camaraderie of working side by side, the way they had done countless times before, preparing for festivals, for family gatherings, for the everyday rhythms of their lives. She took a deep breath, the scent of warm spices filling her lungs, and then, with a determined resolve, she moved from the kitchen, her steps a little heavier than before, towards where the rabbi was speaking, and where Mary sat, seemingly oblivious. The soft rustle of her tunic, the gentle padding of her sandals on the packed earth floor, were the only sounds accompanying her approach, a subtle interruption to the quiet flow of the rabbi's discourse. As she drew near, she paused for a moment, her eyes sweeping over the scene, taking in the rapt faces of the listeners, the peaceful countenance of the rabbi, and then, finally, the serene, almost ethereal stillness of her sister. A flicker of something akin to resentment, quickly suppressed, crossed her features. She knew, deep down, that Mary meant no disrespect, that her sister's heart was pure and devoted, but at this moment, the practical demands of the household felt overwhelming, and the perceived imbalance weighed heavily on her. Gathering her courage, and perhaps a touch of exasperation, Martha finally spoke, her voice a little louder than she intended, a slight tremor of frustration underlying her words. It was not a shout, not an outburst, but a plea, a question, delivered with a quiet urgency that cut through the peaceful atmosphere. She addressed the rabbi directly, a bold move in their culture for a woman, especially to interrupt a teacher, but her need for resolution was too great to be contained. "Lord," she began, her voice carrying a hint of weariness, "do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone?" Her words, though framed as a question, held a quiet accusation, a plea for intervention, for justice. She paused, allowing the weight of her question to settle, her gaze shifting briefly to Mary, then back to the rabbi, her eyes conveying the unspoken plea for him to understand her predicament, to see the unfairness of the situation. "Tell her then to help me." The words hung in the air, a sudden ripple in the calm surface of the evening. The gentle murmur of the rabbi's voice had ceased, and a quiet hush fell over the small gathering. All eyes, which had been fixed on the rabbi, now turned towards Martha, then to Mary, then back to the rabbi, a silent expectation filling the space. The disciples, who had been listening intently, shifted slightly, perhaps sensing the delicate nature of the moment, the subtle tension that had entered the room. Mary, who had been so utterly absorbed, slowly became aware of the shift in atmosphere. She felt the sudden cessation of the rabbi's voice, the turning of heads, and then, finally, the gentle sting of her sister's words, sharp and clear in the quiet. Her eyes, which had been soft and luminous with spiritual contemplation, now held a flicker of surprise, a dawning awareness of the world she had momentarily forgotten. She looked at Martha, seeing the flushed cheeks, the slightly disheveled hair, the weariness in her eyes, and a wave of understanding, tinged with a quiet sadness, washed over her. She knew her sister's heart, her tireless devotion, her unwavering commitment to hospitality, and she understood the depth of Martha's frustration, even if she herself had been lost in a different kind of devotion. The rabbi, however, did not immediately respond. He looked at Martha, his gaze soft, understanding, yet unwavering. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a profound compassion, a deep seeing into the heart of her struggle. He saw her earnest desire to serve, her meticulous attention to detail, her genuine love for her guests, and the immense pressure she felt to uphold the traditions of hospitality. He understood the cultural expectations, the societal roles, the very fabric of their daily lives that shaped her actions and her anxieties. He knew that her complaint stemmed not from malice, but from a place of genuine concern, a deep-seated need for order and fairness, and a desire to honor him in the best way she knew how. He then turned his gaze to Mary, his eyes lingering for a moment on her still, peaceful form, her face now touched with a hint of vulnerability. He saw her profound hunger for spiritual truth, her unwavering focus on his words, her quiet devotion that transcended the immediate demands of the physical world. He understood that her choice was not one of idleness or disrespect, but of a deep, spiritual yearning, a recognition of a different kind of sustenance, a different kind of service. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant chirping of crickets beginning their evening chorus and the soft rustle of leaves in the cooling breeze. The air, which had been thick with the scent of cooking, now seemed to carry a subtle fragrance of olive wood smoke from a nearby hearth, a comforting, earthy aroma that spoke of home and tradition. The golden light of the setting sun had now deepened to a rich amber, painting the walls of the house with a warm, inviting glow, yet casting the figures within into softer, more nuanced shadows. Finally, the rabbi spoke, his voice gentle, calm, and infused with a profound tenderness. It was not a reprimand, nor a dismissal, but an invitation to a deeper understanding, a quiet reframing of priorities. His words were not sharp or critical, but rather like a balm, intended to soothe Martha's troubled spirit, to illuminate a truth that, in her busyness, she might have momentarily overlooked. "Martha, Martha," he began, his voice a soft, rhythmic cadence, repeating her name with a gentle emphasis that conveyed both affection and a quiet concern. The repetition itself was like a gentle caress, drawing her attention fully to him, acknowledging her, validating her presence and her efforts. "You are anxious and troubled about many things." His words were not an accusation, but a simple, profound observation, a recognition of the internal state that had driven her actions, her complaint. He saw the burden she carried, the weight of her responsibilities, the endless list of tasks that clamored for her attention, pulling her in countless directions. He understood the feeling of being overwhelmed, of having one's peace disturbed by the relentless demands of the day, the constant striving to meet expectations, both her own and those of her culture. He saw the very human struggle to balance the practical necessities of life with the deeper longings of the spirit, the tension between doing and being. He paused, allowing his words to settle, to resonate in the quiet space, giving Martha a moment to absorb the gentle truth of his observation. The air seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the completion of his thought, for the revelation that was to follow. The disciples watched, their faces reflecting a quiet anticipation, perhaps recognizing in Martha's struggle a reflection of their own daily dilemmas, their own moments of being pulled between the urgent and the important. "But one thing is needful," he continued, his voice now imbued with a quiet certainty, a profound clarity that cut through the complexities of Martha's anxieties. The phrase itself was simple, direct, yet it carried the weight of eternal truth, a distillation of wisdom into its most essential form. He was not dismissing her efforts, not negating the importance of hospitality or service, but rather pointing to a foundational principle, a singular priority that, when embraced, could bring peace amidst the clamor. He then looked towards Mary, his gaze softening further, a subtle acknowledgement of her choice, her quiet wisdom. "Mary has chosen the good portion." His words affirmed Mary's decision, not as an act of idleness or neglect, but as a deliberate, conscious choice of something of immense and lasting value. The good portion was not a material possession, not a temporary comfort, but a spiritual inheritance, a profound connection to truth and life itself. It was the act of listening, of absorbing, of being present to the divine, a nourishment for the soul that transcended the fleeting satisfaction of a well-prepared meal, which will not be taken away from her. This final phrase carried a deep resonance, a promise of permanence, of an enduring treasure that no circumstance, no earthly change, no passing moment could diminish or remove. Unlike the meal, which would be consumed and forgotten, unlike the chores, which would always return, Mary's chosen portion was eternal, a wellspring of sustenance that would continue to refresh and sustain her long after the plates were cleared and the guests had departed. It was a comfort that settled deep within the spirit, inviting a profound and restorative peace that transcended the immediate moment, extending its gentle tendrils into the quiet hours of the night and the busy days that would follow. The evening would have deepened around the small home in Bethany, the warm glow of oil lamps casting long, dancing shadows across the whitewashed walls, illuminating the simple, sturdy furnishings that spoke of a life lived with purpose and humility. Perhaps the air, which had been warm and still throughout the long afternoon, began to cool slightly with the approaching night, carrying with it the faint, sweet scent of jasmine from a nearby trellis or the earthy aroma of dust settling on the olive trees just beyond the village's edge. The sounds of the day, the distant bleating of sheep, the murmur of voices from neighboring homes, the rhythmic thud of a pestle in a mortar, would have gradually softened, fading into the gentle hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of leaves in a barely perceptible breeze. Inside, the hushed voices of the disciples, perhaps gathered in small groups, would have mingled with the soft, steady tone of Jesus' teaching, creating an atmosphere of quiet contemplation and deep attentiveness. Martha, having perhaps retreated to the cooler, darker corners of the kitchen, might have found a moment to lean against the rough-hewn stone wall, feeling the lingering warmth of the day radiating from it, a silent witness to her tireless efforts. Her hands, calloused from years of preparing meals and tending to the needs of her household, might have still felt the phantom weight of the water jars, the smooth coolness of the clay, or the slight stickiness of dough. Her mind, though perhaps still replaying the earlier exchange, might have begun to unwind, the tension in her shoulders slowly easing as the immediate demands of hospitality receded into the background. She would have heard the quiet murmur from the main room, the steady cadence of Jesus' voice, and perhaps, despite her earlier frustrations, a part of her would have felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her home, her very efforts, had provided this sacred space for such profound communion. The village of Bethany itself, nestled on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, just a short journey from the bustling city of Jerusalem, was a place of relative tranquility, a haven from the constant clamor of the larger metropolis. Its narrow, winding paths, often paved with ancient, uneven stones, would have been quiet by this hour, the small shops shuttered, their wooden doors secured against the night. The scent of wood smoke, perhaps from a neighbor's cooking fire or a small brazier used for warmth, might have drifted gently through the air, mixing with the faint, sweet fragrance of herbs growing wild on the hillsides. The stars, unobscured by city lights, would have begun to emerge, a vast, shimmering tapestry against the velvet blackness of the Judean sky, each tiny pinprick of light a silent testament to the ancient, enduring rhythms of the cosmos. For Mary, seated at Jesus' feet, the passage of time might have seemed to dissolve, the world outside the small circle of light and wisdom fading into an indistinct blur. The texture of the rough woven cloth beneath her, the faint scent of olive oil from the lamp, the subtle shifts in the air as people moved or breathed, all these sensory details would have been secondary to the profound resonance of the words she was hearing. Her gaze, perhaps fixed on the gentle rise and fall of Jesus' chest as he spoke, or on the expressive movements of his hands, would have been one of complete absorption, her spirit drinking deeply from the wellspring of his teaching. The stories he told, the parables he wove, would have painted vivid pictures in her mind, tales of sowers and seeds, of lost sheep and prodigal sons, each one imbued with a timeless wisdom that spoke directly to the deepest longings of the human heart. The historical context of such gatherings was deeply rooted in the Jewish tradition of discipleship, where students would often sit at the feet of their rabbis, absorbing their teachings, memorizing their words, and engaging in profound dialogue. This was not merely a casual conversation, but a sacred act of learning, a transmission of wisdom from teacher to student, often extending late into the night. The role of women in such settings, while not entirely unheard of, was certainly less common than that of men, making Mary's choice all the more poignant and significant. Her presence there, openly engaging in this form of spiritual learning, challenged the conventional social norms of the time, quietly asserting her right to seek spiritual nourishment in the same way as any man. The concept of the one thing needful that Jesus spoke of was not a rejection of Martha's practical service, but rather an elevation of spiritual prioritization. It was an invitation to recognize that while the physical needs of the body and the demands of daily life were important, there was a deeper hunger, a more profound thirst, that only spiritual truth could satisfy. This truth, once grasped, had the power to transform one's perspective, to imbue even the most mundane tasks with a sense of purpose and grace, making the burdens of life feel lighter, the challenges more manageable. It was a truth that offered solace in sorrow, strength in weakness, and an enduring hope that transcended the fleeting joys and inevitable sorrows of the earthly existence. As the hours drifted by, the oil in the lamps would have slowly diminished, the flames flickering and dancing, casting longer, softer shadows that stretched and swayed with every subtle movement in the room. The air might have grown cooler, prompting some to draw their cloaks more tightly around them, the rough wool offering a comforting warmth against the chill. The sounds from outside would have grown even more hushed, the village sinking into the deep slumber of the night, save for the occasional bark of a distant dog or the soft hoot of an owl from the olive groves. Inside, the atmosphere would have remained one of profound peace, a quiet sanctuary where minds were opened and spirits were nourished. Martha, perhaps having completed her final tasks, might have eventually rejoined the group, perhaps sitting a little further back, observing the scene with a different perspective. The aroma of freshly baked bread, long since consumed, might have still lingered faintly in the air, a testament to her earlier industry, now mingling with the subtler sense of lamp oil and human presence. Her heart, though still perhaps carrying a faint echo of her earlier anxieties, might have begun to soften, a quiet understanding slowly dawning within her. She might have seen the serene expression on Mary's face, the rapt attention of the other disciples, and in the gentle, unwavering gaze of Jesus, a profound love that encompassed both her tireless service and her sister's quiet devotion. The teachings of Jesus, delivered in such intimate settings, were often deeply personal, tailored to the specific needs and understandings of those present. He spoke not from a distant pulpit but from the heart of human experience, drawing on familiar imagery from daily life to the farmer in his field, the shepherd with his flock, the woman baking bread to illustrate profound spiritual truths. This approach made his message accessible to all, regardless of their social standing or level of education, inviting everyone to participate in the journey of spiritual discovery. The quiet murmur of his voice, rich with compassion and wisdom, would have resonated deeply within the hearts of his listeners, planting seeds of understanding that would continue to grow and blossom long after the words themselves had faded into the quiet of the night. The house itself, a typical Judean home of the era, would have been built of local stone, perhaps with a flat roof accessible by an external staircase, offering a cool retreat in the heat of the day and a place for quiet contemplation under the vast expanse of the night sky. The interior would have been simple, functional, yet imbued with the warmth of family life. Woven mats or rugs might have covered parts of the packed earth floor, providing a measure of comfort, and clay pots and jars would have lined the walls, holding water, grains, and other provisions. The air, though perhaps a little smoky from the oil lamps, would have carried the faint, comforting scent of home, a mixture of cooking spices, dried herbs, and the unique aroma of human presence. Mary's choice to sit and listen was not a rejection of her sister's work, but rather an affirmation of a different kind of service, one that fed the spirit rather than the body. In a society where women's roles were primarily defined by domestic duties and family responsibilities, her act was a quiet revolution, a gentle assertion of her spiritual autonomy. She was claiming her right to be a disciple, to learn and grow in faith, to seek the better part that Jesus spoke of. This better part was not about avoiding work, but about aligning one's priorities with the eternal, about finding nourishment for the soul that would sustain one through all of life's challenges. The concept of one thing needful carried a profound weight, suggesting that amidst the myriad distractions and demands of daily life, there was a singular, overarching priority that, if attended to, would bring all other aspects of life into proper balance. It was an invitation to simplify, to focus, to discern what truly mattered in the grand scheme of existence. For Mary, that meant sitting at the feet of the Master, absorbing his wisdom, allowing his words to penetrate the deepest recesses of her being, transforming her from the inside out. This was not a passive act but an intensely active one, a profound engagement of heart, mind, and spirit. As the night deepened, the sounds from within the house would have grown softer, the voices becoming more hushed, the movements more gentle. The disciples, perhaps feeling the gentle pull of sleep, might have begun to recline more comfortably, their bodies relaxing into the quiet embrace of the night. The rhythmic breathing of those around her, the subtle creak of a wooden beam, the gentle flicker of the dying lamp, all these sensory details would have contributed to an atmosphere of profound serenity, a peaceful prelude to the restorative slumber that awaited them. The memory of this evening, this quiet gathering in Bethany, would have lingered long in the hearts and minds of those present, a cherished moment of communion and profound learning. For Mary, it would have been a foundational experience, a wellspring of spiritual strength that would sustain her through future trials and uncertainties. For Martha, it would have been a lesson in perspective, a gentle reminder that while her practical service was invaluable, there was a deeper, spiritual nourishment that was equally, if not more, essential. The balance between these two aspects of life to active service and contemplative devotion to was a delicate one, a dance between the demands of the world and the yearnings of the soul. The air, now cool and still, would have carried the faint, sweet scent of night-blooming flowers, perhaps the delicate fragrance of narcissus or the earthy aroma of damp soil after a light evening dew. The stars, now fully ablaze in the inky blackness of the sky, would have seemed impossibly bright, each one a tiny diamond scattered across a vast, dark canvas, silently witnessing the quiet unfolding of this sacred night. The gentle rustle of leaves in the olive trees, stirred by an almost imperceptible breeze, would have provided a soft, rhythmic counterpoint to the hushed silence within the house, a natural lullaby inviting weary souls to rest. The warmth of the day, having completely receded, would have given way to the cool embrace of the night, a comforting blanket that settled over the village, quieting all movement, inviting all living things to surrender to the deep, restorative peace of sleep. The soft glow of the oil lamps, now burning low, would have cast a warm, inviting light across the faces of those gathered, illuminating their expressions of quiet contemplation and profound peace. The subtle scent of the lamp oil, a mixture of earthy and slightly smoky notes, would have mingled with the lingering aromas of the evening meal, creating a comforting and familiar fragrance that permeated the air, a scent that would forever be associated with this sacred gathering, this moment of profound spiritual nourishment. The gentle breathing of those around, a soft, rhythmic sound, would have filled the quiet space, a collective sigh of contentment and peace, a testament to the soothing power of shared presence and profound wisdom. The feeling of the rough, woven fabric beneath one's hand, the cool smoothness of a clay cup, the subtle shift of weight as one settled more deeply into a comfortable position, all these small, tactile sensations would have contributed to a sense of deep relaxation, a quiet surrender to the peaceful rhythms of the evening. The distant hoot of an owl, a soft, mournful sound carried on the cool night air, would have been the only break in the profound stillness, a gentle reminder of the natural world continuing its quiet vigil outside the warm, inviting sanctuary of the home. The sense of peace, deep and pervasive, would have settled over everyone present, a gentle balm for the soul, inviting a profound and tranquil rest that promised to refresh and renew the spirit, preparing it for the dawn of a new day, a day that would bring its own demands and its own blessings, but a day that would be faced with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper understanding of what truly matters. A quiet confidence rooted in the knowledge that one had chosen the better part, the one thing needful, a treasure that would endure long after the fleeting moments of earthly existence had passed, a comfort that settled deep within the spirit, inviting a profound and restorative peace that permeated every fiber of one's being, a gentle balm for the weary soul. And so, as the sun began its slow descent towards the western hills, painting the sky in hues of soft orange and rose, casting long, dancing shadows across the Galilean landscape, a quiet understanding settled over the small gathering in Bethany. The air, which had perhaps felt a little charged with unspoken tension, now softened, carrying the faint, sweet scent of jasmine from a nearby trellis, mingled with the earthy aroma of baked bread cooling on a window sill and the subtle, woody fragrance of the olive oil lamp that had just been lit within the main room, its small flame flickering gently, pushing back the encroaching twilight. The sounds of the day, the distant bleating of sheep, the low murmur of conversation from neighboring homes, the occasional call of a bird settling into its nest for the night, all began to recede, replaced by the hushed quiet that often accompanies the transition from day to night in a village nestled among the hills. Jesus, with that same gentle gaze, continued to speak, his voice a low, steady current, like a smooth river flowing over ancient stones, his words weaving a tapestry of comfort and wisdom that seemed to settle around Mary like a warm, familiar cloak. He spoke of the kingdom of heaven, not as a distant, abstract concept, but as something near, something accessible, like the fertile soil beneath their feet, or the clear water drawn from the village well. He described it in parables, small stories that unfolded like miniature dramas, each one holding a kernel of profound truth, inviting the listener to ponder, to reflect, to find their own meaning within its simple narrative. Perhaps he spoke of the sower, scattering seeds across varied ground, some falling on rocky paths, others among thorns, and still others on rich, fertile earth, where they took root and blossomed, yielding an abundant harvest. Mary, her eyes fixed upon him, absorbed every syllable, her mind not racing with questions or concerns, but simply receiving, like a thirsty land drinking in a gentle rain. Martha, having perhaps retreated to the cooler, quieter space of the kitchen, or perhaps having found a moment of respite on the small, shaded porch, might have still heard the cadence of his voice, a low, rhythmic hum that drifted through the open doorway, mingling with the soft clatter of earthenware pots being stacked, or the gentle swish of a cloth wiping down a wooden table. Even if her hands were still busy, her spirit, perhaps, had begun to slow its frantic pace, the earlier flurry of activity beginning to subside, replaced by a softer, more reflective mood. The aroma of herbs, perhaps fresh mint or thyme, crushed inadvertently between her fingers as she moved about, would have filled the air around her, a small, grounding detail in the midst of her thoughts. She might have paused, her gaze drifting out towards the darkening sky, where the first few stars were beginning to prick through the deep blue velvet like tiny, distant diamonds. A sigh, perhaps, a soft, almost imperceptible release of breath, might have escaped her lips, a silent acknowledgement of the day's demands, and perhaps a nascent recognition of a different kind of hunger, one that could not be satisfied by even the most perfectly prepared meal. The village of Bethany itself, a small cluster of homes perched on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, just a short walk from the bustling grandeur of Jerusalem, was a place steeped in ancient rhythms. Its name, derived from the Aramaic Beit Anya, meaning house of affliction or house of dates, suggested a history intertwined with both hardship and sustenance. The air here, especially in the evening, carried the distinct scent of olive groves, their gnarled, ancient branches silhouetted against the twilight, and the faint, sweet perfume of fig trees, their broad leaves rustling softly in the gentle breeze. The homes, typically constructed from local limestone, with flat roofs often used for drying fruits or for sleeping on warm nights, would have glowed with the warm, inviting light of oil lamps, casting soft, golden rectangles onto the narrow, dusty paths. The sounds would have been those of a community settling down for the night, the distant bleating of goats being penned, the rhythmic grinding of a hand mill preparing grain for the next day's bread, the low, comforting hum of family conversations drifting from open windows, punctuated by the occasional bark of a village dog. For Martha, whose life was so deeply intertwined with the practicalities of hospitality and the meticulous care of her home, these sights and sounds were not just background noise, they were the very fabric of her existence, the tangible expressions of her love and devotion. She understood the importance of a clean home, of a well-stocked pantry, of a table laden with nourishing food. In a culture where hospitality was not merely a social grace but a sacred duty, a reflection of one's honor and standing within the community, Martha's dedication was commendable, a testament to her generous spirit. The preparation of a meal for a revered guest like Jesus, especially one who traveled with a retinue of disciples, would have been a significant undertaking, requiring careful planning, trips to the local market for fresh produce, perhaps a visit to a neighbor for a particular spice, and hours spent over a smoky hearth, tending to the cooking. The heat from the oven, the steam from boiling pots, the rhythmic chopping of vegetables, the kneading of dough, to these were the physical expressions of her care, her way of showing honor and respect. Mary, on the other hand, embodied a different kind of devotion, one that was less outwardly demonstrative but no less profound. Her choice to sit at Jesus' feet was not a rejection of her sister's efforts, nor was it an act of idleness. It was, rather, a profound act of spiritual hunger, a recognition that the nourishment of the soul was paramount, even above the most pressing earthly concerns. In that cultural context, for a woman to sit at the feet of a rabbi, traditionally the posture of a disciple, was unconventional, perhaps even audacious. It spoke volumes about her earnest desire to learn, to absorb, to be taught directly by the Master. Her posture, perhaps cross-legged on a woven mat, her hands resting calmly in her lap, her head tilted slightly, would have conveyed an intense focus, an openness of spirit that transcended the social expectations of the day. The faint scent of the oil lamp, the earthy smell of the clay floor, the subtle fragrance of the linen tunic Jesus wore, to these sensory details would have subtly underscored the intimacy and immediacy of her experience. The teachings of Jesus, particularly as he spoke in the quiet intimacy of that Bethany home, often touched upon themes that resonated deeply with the human condition, the fleeting nature of material possessions, the enduring value of spiritual riches, the importance of seeking first the kingdom of God. He might have spoken of the lilies of the field, how they neither toil nor spin, yet Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. He might have drawn parallels between the transient beauty of a flower and the ephemeral concerns that often consume human lives, gently guiding his listeners towards a deeper understanding of what truly lasts, what truly matters in the grand tapestry of existence. His voice, unhurried and resonant, would have carried a quiet authority, an assurance that stemmed not from earthly power, but from a profound connection to divine truth. As the evening deepened, the sounds from outside would have grown fainter, the village settling into its nocturnal slumber. The only light within the room would have been the soft, flickering glow of the oil lamp, casting dancing shadows on the walls, making the familiar space feel both intimate and slightly mysterious. The air would have grown cooler, carrying the fresh, clean scent of the night, perhaps a hint of dew forming on the nearby olive leaves. The rhythmic chirping of crickets would have begun, a gentle, hypnotic chorus that often accompanies the quiet hours after sunset, a natural lullaby for the weary. Martha, perhaps having finished her tasks, might have returned to the main room, not to resume her complaints, but to simply be present, to absorb the atmosphere, to perhaps even listen, truly listen, to the words of Jesus. The earlier tension, like a cloud passing across the sun, would have dissipated, replaced by a softer, more yielding spirit. She might have found a quiet corner, perhaps near the doorway, or on a low stool, her hands now still, her gaze no longer fixed on tasks, but perhaps, like Mary's, drawn towards the gentle countenance of Jesus. The aroma of the evening meal, perhaps a simple stew of lentils and vegetables, or freshly baked flatbread, would have lingered in the air, a comforting, homely scent that spoke of sustenance and care. The silence that punctuated Jesus' words would have been as significant as the words themselves, to moments of quiet reflection, allowing the truths he spoke to sink in, to settle deep within the hearts of his listeners. These were not hurried pronouncements, but gentle invitations to contemplation, to an inner journey of discovery. The weight of the day, the burdens of life, the anxieties that often cling to the human spirit, would have begun to lift, replaced by a sense of calm, a quiet surrender to the profound wisdom being offered. Mary, in her stillness, was not merely passively listening, she was actively receiving, her spirit open and receptive, like a finely tuned instrument resonating with a beautiful melody. Her posture, her unwavering gaze, her quiet demeanor, all communicated a deep reverence, a profound respect for the teacher and his message. She understood, perhaps instinctively, that this moment, this precious time spent in the presence of Jesus, was a gift, a rare opportunity to nourish her soul in a way that no earthly provision could. The faint scent of the burning olive oil from the lamp, the subtle warmth emanating from its small flame, would have been gentle reminders of the present moment, grounding her in the here and now, allowing her to fully immerse herself in the experience. The historical context of their lives, in a land under Roman occupation, often fraught with political tension and social unrest, made these moments of spiritual peace all the more precious. The daily grind of life, the constant demands of survival, the ever-present awareness of external pressures, could easily overshadow the deeper needs of the spirit. Yet, in that small home in Bethany, amidst the familiar comforts of family and hearth, a different kind of reality was being unveiled, a reality where the kingdom of God was not a distant hope, but a present possibility, a quiet revolution of the heart. As the night deepened, the stars outside would have grown brighter, piercing the inky blackness with their ancient, unwavering light. The moon, perhaps a crescent or a gibbous orb, would have cast a soft, silvery glow over the sleeping village, illuminating the winding paths and the silent olive groves. The air would have become distinctly cooler, perhaps prompting someone to draw a light shawl more closely around their shoulders. The sounds of the crickets would have continued their rhythmic serenade, a soothing, repetitive sound that often lulls one into a state of deep relaxation. Jesus, in his gentle way, would have continued to speak, perhaps moving on to other parables, other teachings, each one building upon the last, like layers of fine silk being woven into a rich tapestry. He might have spoken of forgiveness, of compassion, of the boundless love of God, his words flowing like a gentle stream, washing over the listeners, cleansing and renewing. The quiet hum of his voice, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the soft rustle of his garments as he occasionally shifted position, would have all contributed to the serene atmosphere, an almost hypnotic quality that invited rest and contemplation. Mary, still seated at his feet, would have felt a profound sense of contentment, a deep peace settling within her. The world outside, with its demands and distractions, would have receded, becoming a distant echo. All that mattered in that moment was the quiet presence of Jesus, the wisdom of his words, the gentle warmth of his spirit. Her heart, once perhaps prone to the anxieties and concerns of daily life, would have found a quiet harbor, a place of refuge and renewal. The subtle scent of the earth, perhaps carried in on a gentle breeze through the open door, mingled with the lingering aroma of the evening meal and the faint, sweet perfume of night-blooming jasmine, would have created a sensory tapestry that was both comforting and deeply grounding, drawing her further into a state of profound, restorative calm, a quiet surrender to the gentle current of the moment, a feeling of being utterly present, utterly at peace. As the soft glow of the oil lamp cast long, dancing shadows upon the walls, and the rhythmic chirping of the crickets outside began to merge with the quiet hum of her own peaceful breathing, a gentle invitation to let go, to drift, to simply be, in the quiet embrace of the deepening night, a profound and quiet stillness that settled deep within the very core of her being, a gentle, unwavering sense of belonging, of being exactly where she was meant to be, listening to the words that nourished her soul, words that were like a gentle rain falling on parched earth, bringing forth new life, new understanding, a quiet blossoming within her spirit, a profound sense of peace that spread throughout her entire being, like ripples in a calm pond, extending outwards, encompassing everything, dissolving all worries, all tensions, all the hurried demands of the day, leaving only a profound, quiet sense of presence. Mary, perhaps, felt this most acutely in that moment, her gaze fixed upon the rabbi, her mind absorbing each word, each inflection, each subtle shift in his expression, as if she were a thirsty desert flower finally receiving a long-awaited rain, every pore opening to drink deeply from the wellspring of his teaching. The air around them, still warm from the afternoon sun, now carried the faint scent of baking bread from a nearby hearth, mingling with the earthy fragrance of the olive wood table and the sweet, lingering perfume of dried herbs that hung in small bundles from the rafters. Dust motes, caught in the last slanting rays of light filtering through the small, high window, danced lazily in the golden shafts, illuminating the quiet reverence etched upon Mary's face, a face now softened, unburdened by the usual anxieties of daily life, reflecting only a deep, abiding contentment. She sat there, not as a guest, but as one who had found her true place, her spirit settling into a rare and precious stillness, a quiet harbor after a long voyage. Meanwhile, in the bustling heart of the household, Martha moved with a different kind of energy, a whirlwind of purposeful activity, her hands constantly engaged, her mind racing ahead, anticipating every need, every potential oversight, every detail that might contribute to the comfort and honor of her esteemed guest. The kitchen, a separate, cooler room often built with thick stone walls to keep out the summer heat, would have been a hive of quiet industry, even with just one person. The rhythmic thud of a pestle grinding spices in a stone mortar, the gentle hiss of olive oil warming in a clay pan over a small charcoal brazier, the rustle of dried figs being arranged on a platter, the soft clinking of earthenware dishes as they were carried from a shelf to the preparation area. These were the sounds of Martha's devotion, her expression of hospitality, her way of showing love and respect. Her brow, perhaps, was furrowed just a little, a faint line of concentration etched between her eyes, as she mentally ticked off a list of tasks, ensuring that nothing would be amiss, that the meal would be a fitting tribute to the honored teacher. She might have been kneading dough for fresh flatbread, her strong hands working the resilient mass, feeling its elasticity, shaping it with practiced ease, the flour dusting her fingers and forearms, a fine white powder that spoke of honest labor. The air in the kitchen would have been thick with the yeasty aroma of the rising dough, the pungent scent of garlic and onions being chopped, the earthy sweetness of dates and honey, all blending into a symphony of culinary promise. The heat from the small cooking fires would have warmed her face, a gentle flush spreading across her cheeks, a testament to her diligent efforts. She might have paused for a moment, wiping a stray wisp of hair from her forehead with the back of her hand, her gaze sweeping across the organized chaos of her kitchen, a momentary flicker of satisfaction mixed with a growing sense of urgency. As the afternoon wore on, and the shadows lengthened, stretching across the courtyard and into the main living area, a subtle shift in the light would have signaled the approaching evening, bringing with it a renewed pressure to complete the preparations. The other guests, perhaps a few close friends or neighbors who had gathered to hear Jesus, would have begun to feel the gentle stirrings of hunger, their conversations softening, their glances occasionally drifting towards the kitchen entrance, a silent acknowledgement of the impending meal. Martha, ever attuned to the unspoken rhythms of her household, would have sensed this, her movements quickening, a slight tension beginning to coil in her shoulders. She was, after all, the mistress of the house, the one responsible for its smooth functioning, for the well-being of all who entered its doors. Her thoughts, undoubtedly, would have turned to Mary, her sister, who remained in the other room, seemingly oblivious to the mounting demands. A sigh, perhaps, escaped Martha's lips, a soft, almost imperceptible sound, as she imagined Mary still sitting there, engrossed, lost in the teacher's words, while the tasks piled up, the flatbread still needed to be baked, the lentils simmered, the fish fried, the wine poured, the table set. It wasn't that Martha begrudged Mary her spiritual devotion, not entirely, but there was a practical reality that pressed upon her, a tangible need for assistance, for an extra pair of hands to lighten the load, to ensure that everything was done properly, honorably, without haste or oversight. The cultural expectations of hospitality in that time and place were immense, a sacred duty, a profound expression of honor and respect. To host a revered rabbi, especially one as renowned as Jesus, was a privilege, but also a significant undertaking, requiring meticulous planning and tireless effort. A host's reputation, and by extension, the family's honor, rested upon the quality of the welcome extended to their guests. Every detail, from the freshness of the water offered for washing feet to the abundance and variety of the food served, spoke volumes about the host's generosity and devotion. Martha, a woman of deep integrity and commitment, understood this implicitly, and she strove for nothing less than perfection in her role. The aroma of the cooking, now richer and more complex, would have begun to waft from the kitchen, mingling with the scent of the evening air, carrying with it the promise of sustenance and fellowship. The sun, by now, would have dipped lower, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple, casting long, dramatic shadows across the dusty path outside, and softening the light within the house to a warm, inviting glow. Oil lamps, small clay vessels with wicks floating in olive oil, would soon need to be lit, their gentle flames adding to the intimate atmosphere, chasing away the encroaching darkness. It was perhaps at this point, when the preparations reached a critical juncture, when the weight of responsibility felt heaviest upon her shoulders, that Martha's patience began to fray, just a little, like a well-worn rope under too much strain. The image of Mary, serene and absorbed, while she, Martha, toiled alone, would have sharpened in her mind, a stark contrast that pricked at her sense of fairness. A quiet resentment, not malicious, but born of exhaustion and a feeling of being overlooked, might have begun to bubble beneath the surface of her calm demeanor. She might have tried to catch Mary's eye, perhaps with a meaningful glance, a subtle gesture, a silent plea for help, but Mary, lost in the profound depth of the moment, would have remained oblivious, her focus unwavering. The gentle murmur of Jesus' voice, the quiet attentiveness of the listeners, the peaceful atmosphere of the room, all conspired to keep Mary anchored in that sacred space, unaware of the growing storm within her sister. Finally, unable to bear the burden alone any longer, and perhaps feeling a surge of exasperation, Martha made her decision. She would approach Jesus directly. It was an unusual step, perhaps even a bold one for a woman in that cultural context to interrupt a rabbi's teaching, but her need, her sense of injustice, had reached a point where it overshadowed conventional propriety. She would have wiped her hands on a linen cloth, perhaps smoothed down her tunic, and with a determined set to her jaw, she would have walked from the bustling kitchen into the more tranquil main room. The transition from the heat and activity of the kitchen to the quiet, contemplative atmosphere of the living area would have been stark. The sounds of her own movements, the soft padding of her sandals on the packed earth floor, might have seemed loud to her in the hushed space. Her entrance, though perhaps not overtly dramatic, would have subtly shifted the energy in the room. All eyes, including Jesus's, would have turned towards her, sensing the urgency in her demeanor. She stood before Jesus, her hands perhaps clasped tightly together, her chest rising and falling a little more rapidly than usual, a faint flush still on her cheeks from the kitchen heat and the rising emotion. Her voice, when she spoke, would have been respectful, but tinged with a clear note of complaint, a blend of deference and frustration. "Lord," she would have begun, the title spoken with genuine reverence, "do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone?" Her words, though direct, were carefully chosen, not an accusation against Mary directly, but an appeal to Jesus, a subtle question about his awareness, his concern. "Tell her then to help me." It was a plea, a request for intervention, an expectation that he, as the honored guest and teacher, would understand the practicalities, the demands of hospitality, and would set things right. The air in the room would have thickened, a brief, almost imperceptible tension settling over the gathered listeners. They, too, would have understood Martha's predicament, the cultural expectations, the sheer amount of work involved in hosting such a gathering. Some might have nodded in silent agreement with her unspoken plea, recognizing the fairness of her complaint. Others might have felt a flicker of discomfort, caught between the sisters' contrasting approaches. Jesus, however, did not immediately respond with a command to Mary. Instead, his gaze, which had been resting gently upon Martha, would have softened further, a deep compassion shining in his eyes, a profound understanding that looked beyond the immediate complaint to the heart of the matter. His voice, when he spoke, would have been remarkably gentle, calm, and infused with a warmth that could soothe even the most troubled spirit, a voice that carried no hint of judgment, but only profound love and insight. "Martha, Martha," he would have begun, the repetition of her name not as a rebuke, but as an affectionate, tender address, a way of drawing her in, of acknowledging her, of letting her know that he saw her, truly saw her, in her efforts, in her anxieties, in her very being. The sound of her name, spoken with such tenderness, might have caused a momentary tremor in her resolve, a slight softening of her rigid posture, a flicker of surprise at his gentle tone. He continued, his words flowing with a quiet wisdom, "You are anxious and troubled about many things." He didn't deny her work, nor did he dismiss her concerns as trivial. He acknowledged the reality of her burden, the weight of her responsibilities, the genuine effort she was expending. But his words also offered a deeper perspective, a gentle invitation to look beyond the immediate demands, to consider the underlying source of her distress. The phrase "anxious and troubled" would have resonated deeply within Martha, a quiet recognition of the turmoil that had been churning beneath her outward composure, the internal pressure that had been building with each passing moment. Then, with a profound simplicity that cut through all the complexities of daily life, all the cultural expectations, all the endless tasks, he offered a truth that was both liberating and challenging. But one thing is needful. His voice would have been steady, unwavering, carrying the weight of eternal truth, yet delivered with a tenderness that invited, rather than commanded. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. These words, spoken so softly, yet with such clarity, would have hung in the air, settling upon the hearts of everyone present. The good portion. What could this good portion be? It was not a material possession, not a dish prepared, not a task completed. It was something far more enduring, far more precious. It was the act of listening, of learning, of being present in the moment, of receiving spiritual nourishment directly from the source. It was the quiet blossoming within Mary's spirit, the profound sense of peace that had spread throughout her entire being, the very thing that had dissolved all worries, all tensions, all the hurried demands of the day. For Martha, these words might have initially felt like a gentle sting, a confirmation of her sister's choice being superior to her own tireless efforts. But as Jesus' compassionate gaze remained upon her, as the warmth of his presence enveloped her, the initial sting might have begun to dissipate, replaced by a dawning understanding, a quiet realization that perhaps there was indeed a deeper truth, a more profound priority, beyond the endless cycle of tasks and preparations. The one thing needful was not about neglecting responsibilities, not about abandoning the duties of hospitality, but about prioritizing the spiritual over the temporal, the eternal over the fleeting. It was a gentle reminder that even in the midst of life's necessary labors, there was a deeper hunger to be satisfied, a more profound nourishment to be sought. Mary, in her quiet attentiveness, had instinctively understood this, choosing to feed her soul even as Martha diligently prepared to feed the bodies of her guests. Jesus' words were not a condemnation of Martha's service, for her devotion and hard work were undoubtedly commendable and necessary. He was not saying that her efforts were without value. Rather, he was inviting her to consider the focus of her efforts, the source of her anxiety. He was gently guiding her to understand that while many things clamor for our attention, only one truly sustains the spirit, only one truly brings lasting peace. The conversation would have ended there, a quiet understanding settling over the room. Martha, perhaps, would have taken a deep, slow breath, her shoulders easing just a fraction, the tension in her brow softening. She might not have immediately abandoned her tasks, for the meal still needed to be prepared, but her approach to them might have shifted, a subtle change in her internal landscape, a quiet reordering of priorities. The urgency might have lessened, replaced by a more mindful, less anxious engagement with her duties. Mary, still seated, would have continued to absorb the atmosphere, the gentle wisdom, the profound peace that emanated from the rabbi. She was not being praised for idleness, but for her discernment, for choosing to nurture her inner life, for recognizing the unique opportunity to learn from the Master. Her choice, Jesus affirmed, was a lasting one, a spiritual inheritance that could not be taken away by circumstances, by time, or by the demands of the world. As the evening deepened, and the first stars began to prick through the velvet canopy of the night sky, a quiet calm would have descended upon the house in Bethany. The oil lamps, now lit, would cast flickering pools of warm light, illuminating faces, softening edges, creating an intimate glow. The aromas of the prepared meal, the earthy scent of lentils, the savory fragrance of roasted fish, the sweet notes of honeyed dates would have filled the air, inviting everyone to partake. The sounds of the night would have begun to filter in through the open doorways and windows, the distant bleating of a goat, the soft hoot of an owl from a nearby olive grove, the gentle rustle of palm fronds in a faint breeze, the almost imperceptible hum of insects drawn to the lamplight. The air, cooler now, would carry the scent of dry earth, of distant wood smoke, of the night-blooming jasmine that might have grown near the courtyard wall. The meal itself would have been a quiet affair, filled with warm conversation, with the gentle clinking of earthenware cups, the soft tearing of flatbread, the murmur of voices sharing stories and insights. Martha, perhaps, would have moved more slowly, more deliberately, her movements infused with a newfound serenity, her gaze occasionally resting upon her sister, then upon Jesus, a quiet understanding passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the lesson learned, of the truth revealed. Mary, still quiet, still attentive, would have continued to absorb the presence of the teacher, her spirit nourished, her heart at peace. The good portion she had chosen would continue to resonate within her, a quiet melody playing in the depths of her soul, a profound sense of contentment that transcended the fleeting pleasures of the world. The warmth of the fire in the hearth, now a low, steady glow, would cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating a sense of timeless comfort, a gentle embrace of the night. The scent of the burning olive wood, a soft, smoky fragrance, would mingle with the lingering aromas of the meal, creating a comforting blend that spoke of home, of hospitality, of quiet fellowship. The gentle murmur of voices, now softer, more subdued, would weave a tapestry of sound, a lullaby of human connection, a quiet symphony of rest. The air, cool and fresh, would drift in through the open windows, carrying with it the subtle perfume of the night, the faint whisper of the breeze through the olive trees, a soft, rhythmic sigh. The flickering lamplight, now casting longer, softer shadows, would dance upon the faces of the sleepers, a gentle, hypnotic ballet of light and dark. The warmth of the blankets, soft against the skin, would invite a deeper relaxation, a surrender to the quiet embrace of the night. The gentle rhythm of breath, slow and even, would fill the room, a quiet testament to the peace that had settled upon the household, a profound sense of stillness that permeated every corner, every shadow, every quiet moment, a deep, abiding calm that settled over the heart, over the mind, over the very essence of being, a quiet peace, a gentle stillness, a soft, rhythmic breath, a quiet peace, a gentle stillness, a soft, rhythmic breath. And there we leave it, a story told, a night well spent. Thank you for trusting Easy Drift Sleep with your rest. If these stories bring you comfort, subscribing means we can keep making them for you. Good night. Sleep well.